Good evening. Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education. This is our regular Board of Education meeting on this Tuesday, May the 16th. Charlotte, may you please call the roll?
Dr. Chang?
Here.
Mr. Goldman?
Present.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Dr. Kamoff?
Here.
Ms. Nazarella?
Present.
Dr. Steinberg?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Here.
Student Representative Megan Murphy?
Here.
And Student Representative Caitlin Striffcave?
Here. Thank you. Caitlin, may you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order. And now it is time for public communications. This is where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions, your concerns. We do allow for each individual to speak for 3 minutes, and we ask you to come to the podium and please share your name and your town of residence. Please be mindful of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time is expired, you will see a red card. We ask for you to respectfully please take your seat at that time. Please know that we are attentively listening to you. However, it is policy that we do not comment to comments as they are being made. We also do begin with agenda items first, those who are speaking on agenda items. So we do have a list here, and I will go down the list according to who is named. First, we have Mark Walsh. I'll say once again, Mark Walsh. Okay, next moving to Chris Torino.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Chris Torino. I live at 17 Wiltshire Lane in West Hartford. Good evening. Basically, I'll get right to the point. I am against the revisions to section 8355 about public speaking at the Board of Education meetings. We are the West Hartford Public Schools. Taxpayers are out here. We should have a chance to speak in any meeting like it was before, so I'm against that. When we think of public speaking and we think of our country, we have a nice cemetery in our town. It's loaded with veterans' graves. I'm one of the guys who puts the flags in those graves on Memorial Day. Some of the ages are 17, 18, and 19 who died for our Constitution and our Republic. Let's remember that when we're talking about public speaking. Anybody who wants to speak in front of any public meeting should be able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anita. We'll go in order, and we'll go back to the top of the list. Anita, please.
Hi, my name is Anita, and I'm here to speak about 8355. And I pulled something out from the internet. On April 5th, Romeo, at approximately 10:45, collapsed on the ground. Romeo was allowed to collapse and lay on the ground for nearly 10 minutes without any assistance or medical treatment, despite several teachers being in close proximity. Romeo was allowed to collapse and lay on the ground for nearly 10 minutes, despite several minor children, Romeo's classmates, warning supervising teachers. The excuse of the teachers, and here I'll stop. You have known that I buried a child next to me when he was dying, and my husband and I were holding him in our arms, an infant little boy. Dr. Sanders sang a beautiful Hebrew song that one day we will meet. This little boy died on Charter Oak on a cold April ground. Teachers within the vicinity. On May 17th, Ari Steinberg said children are safer in the classroom than at home. Ari Steinberg, from a mother who knows what loss is. Do my children a favor, resign. Thank you.
So, Excuse me, I do want to say, and I apologize for not sharing beforehand what the agenda items are. I did not want to cut you off while you were speaking on a sensitive subject matter, but do want to state that the agenda items for today are the proposed calendar for the 2024-2025 school year, the State of Connecticut Healthy Food Certification, revision of authorized signers, and revision bylaws of 8355 and 8357, and personnel report. So those are the agenda items, and those are the ones that will be prioritized to go first. So again, those that have named here, assuming you are speaking on an agenda item. If you are not, we do have an opportunity to speak on general comments. Next, we have Addie, who is signed up.
Addie Lord in West Hartford. The Board of Education is a creature of the state. You are not an agent of the town. You are not an agent of the Superintendent's office in WHPS. Your focus and your decision-making should be on what is best for students regarding their education. All students, not stifling the public's voice. Where is Shipman and Goodwin mentioned when it comes to this amending of a policy that was amended in November with Jessica Ritter? This policy has been brought forward by the town attorney, Dallas Dodge. Where is his role in this? Because he is not your legal representative. Shipman and Goodwin rewrote at the taxpayer's expense a policy book 2 years ago, which we've never seen. Where are they tonight? Where was the May 11th subcommittee meeting published? It wasn't. It was an unpublished meeting of a policy subcommittee. It was never mentioned in the minutes of former meetings. It was never mentioned in the agendas. You've allowed personal ideology, philosophy to influence you and your decisions about our children. You have allowed education to be politicized, and our students, our children, have suffered and will suffer more. You've weaponized the very policies that are to protect our children. Us, the stakeholders, we are the voices of those children, not you, not Dallas Dodge, and certainly not your ideology. We need a strong BOE supporting a strong education system that will ensure an excellent education for all our children. Return to the fundamentals that you are supposed to be focusing on. Education. If you cannot bring honor to your role, then do our children the honor of leaving that role. Vacate the seats. Leave somebody come in and focus on education as it should be. And Ronnie Newton, when you start mentioning me on social media about coming and then leaving after I speak, I go home and I view the meeting in full. So do me the courtesy of reaching out to me before you speak about me on social media, because you have reported on none of the problems that the parents have brought to this podium. Thank you.
I'm going to ask again for us to be mindful to keep our comments to agenda items, and also to please demonstrate a level of respect in conveying those comments. Next, we have Ellen.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Nichols, and I live in West Hartford. The board has proposed restricting general comments to a single meeting a month, and in that one meeting, these comments will be heard at the end. This cuts the frequency of comment time in half, and then it relegates it to the very end of the meeting when many viewers have signed off figuratively and literally. Now, I am opposed to this new proposal, and here's why. I feel it should be withdrawn. First of all, it's not necessary. The agenda items are already prioritized in the board changes which were voted in on November 1st of 22, just a few months ago. The business of the board is being accomplished in a timely manner. All you have to do is look back at the minutes. They're published, they're there for everyone to see. It diminishes the trust between the board and the citizens. It's the board's responsibility to build trust and to work with parents and community members. The proposed policy says, we don't want to hear from you. This is similar to the Board of Ed email policy, where we now are just notified of receipt. This policy discourages future emails, as the proposed change to 8355 will discourage future non-agenda comments. It's impossible to establish trust with people who send signals that that what you have to say is not important to them. Third, it reduces transparency. As confirmed by the survey and the focus groups conducted during the superintendent search, lack of transparency by the board and the administration has been an issue the past few years. Various important issues only came to light when they were brought up by citizens in this public comment section. It also tarnishes a tradition. School boards everywhere, and especially in New England, have a long history of being a platform for concerned citizens to speak their mind when they feel something is not right. If it is done respectfully, it should be allowed. And finally, it makes West Hartford an outlier in our DRG by reducing communication with the public instead of expanding it. Simsbury, Glastonbury, Avon, Farmington, Granby, and South Windsor all allow comments in every comment period, not just at the end of the meeting. We have 2 meetings a month because we're twice as big as some of these other towns, and we have twice the number of issues both on and off the agenda. We do live in the time of cancel culture, where we deny to hear those with whom we disagree. That's kind of what this proposal feels like. But I sincerely hope that West Hartford can be better than that, and that we can move forward together, but without this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott Zweig.
Scott Zweig, 19 Claybar Drive, Hull High Warriors, class of 2001. Good evening, fellow West Hartford residents and members of the board. Congratulations, Paul. I'm here tonight to oppose yet another change to Board of Education Policy 8355. It was only 6 months ago that the board modified this very policy to give preference to people commenting on agenda topics and limiting the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting to 30 minutes, with the exception of agenda-related topics. I looked at every single board meeting and minute since September of 2021. And since the policy change in November of last year, the length of the board meetings has drastically reduced. In fact, the last 10 meetings since the change have averaged 1 hour and 40 minutes. And by contrast, the 10 meetings before that, 2 hours and 57 minutes. So if the goal really was to streamline the meetings for efficiencies, then mission accomplished. There has also been a dramatic reduction in the number of public speakers at the start of each meeting. I checked. In fact, the last 10 meetings since the change have averaged only 4 speakers during public comment. 2 on agenda, 2 off agenda. Is 12 minutes of your time really that much to ask? I'm just trying to understand the reason for the change. When the policy was proposed to be changed in September, there was a section of background that explained the reason for the change. It spoke of striking a balance, ensuring public comment does not significantly delay the business portion of the meeting. When the policy was then revised for a second round of readings in November, another background was provided. This mentioned long delays and unfairness to people who wanted to present to the board. Again, it spoke of striking a balance. Interestingly, this time, nothing. No background, no rationale, just a proposed change. So I just want to know, why? Why change it again? Are you not satisfied with the balance you struck just 6 months ago? The public comment period is an opportunity for members of the community to express their views to the board about issues that are important to the schools. Why put further restrictions on that opportunity? Don't you want to hear what parents and students have to say? There's a tremendous value in bringing diversity of thought and inclusion into this very room. In fact, those are the ideals that each of you board members claims to support. So I ask again,
why put further restrictions on the opportunity for diversity and inclusion of thought? I know you'll say that we still have the opportunity to speak at the end of meetings once a month, but why are you making it harder instead of easier for parents and students and residents to relay their expression to you? The current policy accomplishes the goals set out by the board just 6 months ago. Additional changes are not necessary. Please do not restrict our opportunities further and leave policy 8355 alone.
Thank you. Next, we have Bruno, last initial V.
Hi, Bruno Venero, Oakwood Avenue. So my first time here, so bear with me. So I want to talk about the revision for policy 8355. I am against the revision. I think the revision is suspicious, to say the least. You're making it seem more difficult for other people, making it inconvenient for others to bring items on the agenda. As stated earlier, it should be easier, not more difficult. And overall, it just seems, unfair, just downright unfair. So for me, I don't come here every time, so I have the luxury of just watching these videos after they're posted. I can skip a lot of the boring, cringe parts. But people who do come here actually take the time of their out of their busy lives to come here and speak. So overall, I'm against it. It should remain as it is, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, there's Graham.
Evening, everybody. Graham Brown, Bainbridge Road, West Hartford. So I'll be the first to say, and I think every single board member and superintendent that's ever sat here would agree that you've all found out something new from a speaker who's come up here at some point in your career. And that's how it is a lot of the time. Parents who come up here, or citizens or students, whoever, comes up here to share something that happened, something new, something that's concerning. And where better to address it than at the Board of Education? Now, the way information works, a lot of it does not get directly transmitted from paraprofessionals and teachers to the board. And a lot of teachers and paraprofessionals would be afraid to speak at the board meeting for the sake of their jobs. So it's really up to parents and people who care and taxpayers to actually bring issues that have never been talked about. So going back to last year, why did this proposal get addressed? I could say, last year there was a couple of big issues that involved a lot of people coming here to speak. One was the mascot issue, chieftains and warriors being changed to the Red Wolves and the Titans. Another one was the gender identity curriculum at the West Hartford Public School System and the reading books that were obligated for students to read. That got a lot of people emotional and came here to speak because they were concerned about it. And then there's another issue that some of you might forget about is when a couple of parents and relatives of people who came were addressing the two students that committed suicide in town not long ago at two separate public schools in West Hartford. The idea that something like that specifically, because that's not a political issue, that's not something that goes left or right of your political ideology. If your kid kills themselves, or if you have a neighbor whose kid killed themselves in school, and it's happened more than once, you better have the right to come and speak. Who else would you say that to? If there's a problem in our schools with bullying and depression and suicide, why wouldn't we want that shared? And why would you want a parent of someone like that to have to wait once a month to the end of a meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. That is all who we have on the list. I will go back to the first name that was called and wasn't present at the time. Mark Walsh.
Mark Walsh, 33 Huckleberry Lane. So I think what we're all witnessing here is you guys are trying to create an echo chamber, and you're almost there. The only, to prevent non-agenda speakers, or what you're not trying to eliminate, you're trying to discourage us. I've only been here 4 other times before, and this room is very uncomfortable. Look, we even have a uniformed cop in the back. Like, are we that uncivilized where we have to have a cop? I could think of other places he should be right now. But you've made it very uncomfortable in here. You don't even respond. You don't respond to phone calls. You don't respond to emails. The hypocrisies and double standards. I'm surprised you didn't yell at us for clapping, which you've done before. But yet I'll see Beth Bai come up here and throw bouquets at a former chairman because he used to hold very tight meetings where he would minimize public speaking. And you guys were all for it. Deb Pullen, you clapped for her when she left. But, I'm glad tonight that you people are allowed to at least have some expression of gratitude when people come up here. But, I looked up some of your campaign commitments from all of you, and you would be surprised. You need to go back and see what you guys all said and what you wanted to run on, because I can't believe that you want to have this proposal go through, going by your commitments. I even have, I have some of them, but my favorite one, and I'll just go to that one, is actually you, Lorna. You said, who doesn't believe in the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Well, in this town, this village, you guys want to raise our child and keep the parents out of it. It doesn't work that way. We need to be involved. The most important thing for me, and I'm glad somebody brought up the students that, committed suicide. We got a crisis. We just had paid out $3 million for a traumatic brain injury at Wolcott. I didn't even know about it. Next, the early part of this year, in case you don't know, there's a jury selection for a possible molestation at Bugby. Who knew about that from years ago? To make me, because I'm going to stick with student safety. If you see me up here, if you make me wait an hour, hour and a half for you to get rid of you should be discussing that. You shouldn't wait for me at the end of you talking about things that are less important than student safety to come up here and speak for 3 minutes. I don't know how you guys live with yourselves. I really don't. People used to ask me when I was a firefighter, how could I do it? And I said this before to you. I don't know how you guys all do it. You signed up for this. You guys are acting like you were forced into this. You signed up. You ran for these positions. Why are you sitting there if this is such a nuisance to listen to us and to act on what we think is important? Our issues are important. In fact, look at this. The first 5 words of the proposal, the board welcomes public comment. Then when I unjumbled underneath that, you will see the board does not welcome public comment. And we're not here. And the other thing is we're not here with
your
opinions.
Time has expired.
Of course it is. That's another part of the room being uncomfortable is that red card.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on an agenda item? Yes, please do approach the podium.
I don't usually do this. This is actually a little bit uncomfortable, but I feel like I need to...
Please share your name.
Oh, sorry. My name's Ronnie Newton, and I live at 67 Rumford Street. Hello, my name is Ronnie Newton. I live at 67 Rumford Street in West Hartford. Obviously, I don't usually speak, even though I attend pretty much every minute of every Board of Education meeting and have for about the past 12 years. I just wanted to be clear because not everybody may have read what I wrote, but I wanted to read the paragraph that one of the previous speakers, whom I will not name, said and felt that I had identified that person. The paragraph in question, this is the only one I could think of because the only people I named in this article were people that I interviewed. It says, over the past few months, there have been many members of the public who addressed the board about the budget when that was an agenda topic. There are also several members of the public who regularly attend board meetings and speak about non-agenda items, sometimes of a personal nature related to their own children. In most cases, those speakers do not remain for the business portion of the meetings. That's all I said. That's all I wrote in my article, and I just wanted the record to be corrected that I did not name any individuals who have spoken before this board. I interviewed Lorna Thomas Farquharson, I interviewed Gail Harris, and I don't believe I mentioned anybody else in my article. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on an agenda item? Please to approach the podium, share your name and your town of residence.
Cindy Gauthier, West Hartford. I am opposed to the change in 8355 because I already feel like you guys are trying to silence us to begin with, because we come here and we speak about topics and you're not allowed to say anything back. We email and get no response. There's no conversation. So how does change happen? What is the point of all this? If we just come and complain and you guys just sit there and do nothing, why are we all bothering with this? Because our kids are the ones that are losing out in the grand scheme of things. My child, one of them, who's about to graduate next month. I am terrified of what the future holds for her because our town failed her terribly academically. She is not prepared for life, but I can't hold her back because she's passing, and the town won't hold somebody back that's passing. And that's BS, because my kid is not prepared for life in the real world. And I blame it on this town. I blame it on the staff. I blame it on the whole school system, because kids at these schools are not taught how to treat one another with respect and dignity for kids that are different. They don't have any empathy. And my kid was treated so horribly that she had to leave her home school. She deserves everything that every straight A student gets in this town, and she has gotten none of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now going to the list for those that signed up for general comments. First, we have Amanda Madore, last initial M.
Debbie and I are speaking on the same topic, so I figure I could get my 3 minutes and she would receive her 3 minutes. My name is Amanda Madore. I live on Ridgewood Road in West Hartford. I've been a resident of West Hartford for 6 years and will be a West Hartford school parent starting this fall when my son enters kindergarten at Duffy. We are here this evening to bring awareness to an issue that impacts not only the 5 parents that are here with me today, but many more parents and children in the West Hartford public school system, and that is the inadequacy of the before and after care programs. Specifically, in our case, the inadequacy of the Kids Link program at Duffy Elementary. My husband and I are both working parents, as are many other families in this town. The specific issues we are here to address and to bring to the attention of the board are, that is our understanding that the state of Connecticut limits the license of the number of children allowed in the aftercare program at Duffy to 95 students. There are currently 460 students that attend Duffy, which means at full capacity, there's only enough spots for 1 in 5 children. Excuse me. We find it hard to believe that in a town like West Hartford that 4 out of 5 families do not need some sort of aftercare assistance because both parents are working. Despite being allowed to and licensed for 95 students, the Duffy Kids Link program currently is only staffed for 60. This year, the program opened to new families, including kindergartners, on May 1st, and as we went to register, we found out that it was already full, meaning that no new families, including in our case, our kindergartners, were able to sign up for before or after care. The Kids Link used online registration this year for the first time, which I applaud them. Unfortunately, there was a decision made to have the link go live on Sunday at midnight, which you can imagine is difficult for working parents. Despite this, we stayed up till midnight looking to register and get a priority spot, and then the link never went live. According to Kids Link, there was a glitch, and it finally went live 10 a.m. the next day without any proactive communication to parents. This led to an inequitable registration process, and parents who had waited up until midnight or 2 a.m. the night before did not have a chance to register in a priority manner and are now lower on the wait list without any aftercare for their children. There needs to be an accountability and assurance that the aftercare partner that is licensed through the Board of Ed can handle registration and do so in a seamless and equitable manner. What we're here to seek to understand is who is accountable for the relationship between the town of West Hartford, the Board of Ed, and the YWCA Kids Link program. Why are there no other official partners for aftercare if the current partner cannot meet the demand of all the spots that are needed for parents in this town? How can the Board of Ed and the town of West Hartford offer more support to parents that work and need it? Can there be partnerships in place that provide buses to third-party aftercare programs like the JCC, who do offer buses to some schools, but not from Duffy in our example? Why do our taxes and our mill rates in this town continue to rise, but the systems to support families in this town who you're trying to attract and retain to move to West Hartford continue to be subpar when we look at other towns who have lower taxes?
Excuse me, your time has expired. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie today. I live here in West Hartford. I'm speaking on the same topic. I have a 5-year-old son who's going to be attending Duffy in the fall. And really just picking up where Amanda left off, it is our expectation that there is someone each year who manages the contract between the town of West Hartford and the YWCA Kids Link program. And we would like to know whether they are aware of this issue, and also that Kids Link runs 5 of the 10 programs in West Hartford, so half of the elementary school programs. It only seems reasonable to us that the person who manages this relationship should be aware that the one and only before and after care option made available to Duffy families is not meeting our needs, and that they are facing major staffing issues and online registration issues this year with a huge gap in communication to parents. Each year, Duffy Elementary School determines the number of incoming and returning students so that they can appropriately staff to meet that demand. Why is it not also the case that before May 1st, someone has awareness of the number of kids that are in need of before and after care, and that it is someone's job to make sure that the Kids Link program is able to meet that demand? And if Kids Link is unable to meet that demand, is there not another program or option to be considered? We're asking the Board of Education to be an advocate to the parents in West Hartford and be held accountable for coming up with a solution to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah Rossley.
Hi, I'm Sarah Rossley. I live at 34 Sandhurst, and I'm speaking on the same topic that Amanda and Debbie just spoke on. I'm going to keep it very short because they did a great job explaining this is the need. I've been a resident for 10 years. We, like so many other families that we're representing tonight, we came to West Hartford because of the school system, right? Like it has such a wonderful reputation. It is top notch. We're excited to enter and we have a lot of families who are on that wait list that are very excited to join the education system. My very first meeting, it's been really eye-opening, and we weren't really sure how this was going to go, but we're just pleading to help with making sure that there's aftercare spots for the new families coming in. These kids, these are 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. They are very vulnerable population to not have aftercare coverage and to have that be an equitable thing that the whole town can have access to, and we know that there's big gaps. We got a lot of feedback that this has been an issue for years. There's always aftercare shortages. You just kind of have to deal with it, but it doesn't feel right. And especially in a great town like West Hartford, we really would expect that we can find solutions for something like this that is very solvable. It just needs to be looked at new things. So thank you for listening. We really respect your time. There's lots of people on this wait list that we're just trying to speak on behalf of. A lot of young families that are excited to join the system and be part of the education, but we're looking for some support. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all who I see here who have signed up. Is there anyone else here in the audience who would like to speak on a general comment? Please share your name and your town of residence.
Yeah, hi. My name is David Wolpaw, West Hartford, Brewster Road. I have 4 daughters, 2 of whom have graduated from Hall, and 1 at Bristow and 1 currently at Hall. And I'm speaking about the agenda item. First of all, let me say we're very pleased with West Hartford education as a whole. We've been very happy with the quality of education that our children have received. With respect to the agenda item, I'm against it. Surprise. I think everyone else said it very well. I see no reason for this at all, except that you don't want to hear from us. That's it. That's literally the only motivation I can think of. Time isn't the issue because these meetings don't run long, as some people were reviewing the data on that. So I don't see a possible reason for it. I think trying to suppress people from speaking, it doesn't work. it comes out in other ways. It's going to come out in the form of angry emails to the administration. I'm sure Paul would not want that, and his staff wouldn't want that. But it's going to come out in other ways. The West Hartford Public Schools can be embarrassed publicly. I know there was a case a couple years ago where the National Review picked up on it, and it was a problem. I mean, nobody likes public embarrassment. So, to some degree, if you want to look at it in a selfish way, this is an outlet. You can have people speak and you can ignore us if you want. I hope you don't, but you can. But let people speak. People seem almost expecting that you're going to vote for this, and it's a fait accompli. Prove them wrong. Prove that you do want to hear from people and vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a general comment?
Hi, I'm Lydia McCracken, 50 Fairley Road. Basically, I'm urging you to please reconsider the proposed changes to Section 8355. The public should be able to comment on things BOE members do not want to talk about. This should preferably happen at the beginning of meetings when it matters most. Additionally, I believe that these changes are not only unnecessary, but they are also unconstitutional, specifically violating the First Amendment to freedom of speech. I think the Board of Education should be interested in what community members and parents think about these proposed changes without suppressing their right to free speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I'll ask one more time. Okay, we will pause now on public communications. Now continuing on to non-staff communications and reports, where we hear from our student representatives. Let's first begin with Megan, speaking in regard to Conard.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I have a few exciting announcements. As this year comes to a close, there's still a lot of exciting things happening at Conard. First being that our musical, which was Frozen this year, was recently nominated for 5 Stephen Sondheim Awards this year. Those are including Best Director, which was for our teacher Hunter Parker, Best Actor, James Thibault, who played Kristoff, Best Actress, who was Kayla Resniski as Elsa, Best Achievement by Student Orchestra, and Best Musical. And it's a huge honor for our whole theater program, but there will be a performance at the Schubert Theater June 5th to celebrate this and see what the awards are. So best of luck to them, and just a great honor to even be awarded. Also, Unified Theater, our program is amazing at Conard, and they've been working very hard. Hall students come to. Hall and Conard students have been working very hard on their production, which will be this Thursday and Friday, both at 7:30 p.m. I'm really excited to see it. I know they've been working really hard, and it's going to be a great time. Rita's Italian Ice has been outside Conard every Friday, after school, and it's really great for the students. It's a nice little treat, but also the proceeds are going to Safe Grad, which will be after graduation. Great for our seniors. 2 more things. Teacher Appreciation Week. Last week, Conard celebrated that by teachers gave us time to write letters to our teachers, and it was really nice because I know personally I've had a lot of teachers who have made an impact on my life, and it was great to have time to write and really tell them how much we appreciate them. And lastly, tomorrow, the American Red Cross is putting on a blood drive at Conard. I personally am a little scared of needles, so I won't be participating in that, but I know a lot of students are, and it's a really great opportunity for them to donate if possible.
Thank you, Megan. Caitlin, sharing regarding Hall.
Good evening. Super hectic end of year, so I'll go through all the things really fast, but it is quite a few. First of all, AP exams are done, which is awesome. Super cool. We just had junior prom, and we're getting ready for senior prom. Like Megan said, this Thursday and Friday, Unified Theater is hosting their performances at 7:30 at Conard. We have a senior outing on Friday to Six Flags. Next week, there's a Hall art show. Hall Concert Jazz Band performed at Essentially Ellington this past weekend in New York City at Jazz at Lincoln Center. It was amazing. It's the top 15 jazz bands in the country performed. I got to go see it. My brother's in it, so it was really awesome. It was just a great performance and experience overall. Very prestigious. Next Tuesday night is awards night for our students. The spring sports are moving towards championship seasons, or just ending their regular season right around now. The Hall Conard baseball game is at Dunkin' Donuts Park on Tuesday. Relay for Life will be at the annual American Cancer Society event on May 20th. So they have their Relay for Life race, event, walk, whatever you want to do. Thursday, we have representatives from the fire and police department in West Hartford coming by for demonstrations and conversations. The spring play, Smallmouth Sounds, just finished up production last weekend. I went, it was very interesting. Part of it was silent, which was cool. I guess it was play, you know. And that's it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you both so much for the updates. Wonderful things happening. And what we'll do, we'll follow suit and we'll give a round of applause for the both of you for all that's accomplished. Excellent, excellent. And you all, I imagine, are counting down? Counting down. Okay, we'll save our words for next time. All right. Continuing on now to unfinished business. We now will go into the proposed calendar for the 2024-2025 school year, receiving the second reading. We have a recommendation that the Board of Education accept and approve as a second and final reading the proposed calendar for the 2024-2025 school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari. Discussion. So, as we know, this originally was proposed to us several months ago, and at the time of it being proposed, and we all have it before us, we noticed and became aware of an addition of a holiday, as well as other pieces that were on the calendar. And instead of us voting at that time, we wanted to take a moment to pause to allow time to receive additional information and input from the community as it relates to the addition of a particular holiday, that being Diwali. And that was about 2 months ago. And so here we are with the second reading of the calendar. And as you can see, it is similar to what we saw before, and would like to hear your thoughts regarding where we are at this time. And I will share, yes, if you want to hear from me, I will share, and I do appreciate the robust discussion that was had at the time when we had the first reading. And the reason for pausing on the calendar was recognizing that, well, how did we get to this point? And how can we establish a metric or a rubric for how we can add things to the calendar? In particular, when it comes to certain holidays or things along those regards. So I do know that was a question, that was something that was explored. And we'll share that efforts were looked into how can we establish a metric, a rubric for a process, that is, for how to get this added to the calendar. And one of the things that we continuously came across was how to do so in a way that does not violate rights, that does not breach confidentiality, and that does not deviate from what we are allowed to do when it comes to asking certain questions and gathering certain information. And because we continue to come across that item, that did bring us to a place of, boy, how do we establish a metric per se? How do we establish a process per se? Again, we do know that Diwali added to the calendar was put here for very, very various reasons, for good reasons. One of them certainly being we have a very large population of Nepalese within our community, the highest in the state of Connecticut. And actually, West Hartford represents the place where they meet. I'm not recalling the exact word or phrasing of that. We also know that recently at the town hall, they celebrated Nepalese Day. So certainly well represented, but do want to be transparent in saying that in terms of having a specific concrete process or metric, we do not have that. What we do have, and we do continue to adhere, is being receptive to those that are in our community, wanting to represent those that are in our community, and wanting to do so in a way that is fair and equitable. And so again, that is where we are at this point in time. And as it relates to possible additions of other items, those we will have to consider on a case-by-case situation. But just want to be candid in saying we do not have a specific metric or rubric for how to decide on this, but this is where the calendar is at this point in time. So do you want to open it up again for questions, comments, discussion? Ethan, yes.
So just couple quick points. One is, and I'm totally off, when I looked it up on the internet, I came up with a different date, but the internet's, you're supposed to not trust. So as long as you guys have confirmed it's November 1st, that's fine. I realized I had the wrong year the first time, but it did say October 31st and calendar, whatever. So.
Ethan, I'm happy to respond to that question, and thank you. And sorry I didn't get back to you on that second part of your question through email. So if you do look on the internet, and certainly for folks that are not aware, Diwali is a 5-day festival. It carries dramatic significance within the Hindu religion, the equivalent of major holidays of other major religions, and a time for great celebration and family. So certainly, I appreciate your question. Make sure that we get the date right. There are differing dates if you look on differing websites on the internet. What West Hartford has traditionally followed for its holidays is the federally recognized dates for the United States for the holidays, and so that is how and why, when this request was brought forward, the date was specifically identified as November the 1st.
Okay. My second question, and I know you weren't here, and I'm not sure it's a fair question, but I do think we should have guidelines, and I realize, to Lorna's point, we can't go and ask people what their religion is, but we should have some kind of, just some measurement or something. Otherwise, I don't know what the rules are. I mean, I don't know. I'm struggling with this because we don't have a rule. We don't have a measurement, and I'm not sure what the right. And I think that there's enough percentage, then it definitely should be there. But at the same time, and we did have somebody, I think, come speak, but maybe it was an email saying, it creates hardship for parents. So we need to be. We can't just be giving it out as a blank check. We should have and I don't know what the process is, the percentage. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it a religious location? I just think somewhere we need to come up with some kind of process. I'd be happy to vote for this if we're going to do that. I just don't want to vote for it, and then we'll come back to this next year, and how do we define? I don't know. And I realize you just walked into the seat, so.
Well, I see you keep looking at me, so I'll respond.
Well, I don't know what else to ask.
No, that's fair. So certainly, the establishment of the calendars is clearly a governance issue that's related to the board. And what I hear you asking about is supporting you as a board to if you're looking for any help with a process in general. What I would certainly say, because certainly I've taken the seat since the time this discussion started, but I appreciate the process that I observed in terms of, you asked that question a couple of months ago, and I think it's an appropriate question. I think it gave all the board members some pause, and there was, essentially a hold on the decision in order to allow a greater period of time for public to weigh in, either for or against. I definitely appreciate what Lorna shared. I can tell you, in my former seat as assistant superintendent, one of my responsibilities was oversight of the English as a Second Language program, and the dramatic increase in the Nepalese population in West Hartford is a source of pride. I've had the great fortune and privilege to attend ceremonies within the Nepalese community. They've invited. They have and I'm gonna. I don't mean any disrespect for not remembering the specific name of the ceremony that we were invited to. I know that Tom Moore attended it one year. I think Andy attended it one year. I had the privilege to attend it. It was a full day thing, and it was related to kind of the graduation. So I know it's a very prideful community. I know it's a community who's grown. So I certainly respect the discussion at the board table to consider adding this, especially also knowing what this holiday means in that culture. In terms of a greater process, I think that's a fair question, and I think that's something that if you as a board want support with from my offices, we can assist you with that. I just want to be careful that
So maybe
it won't be a case of me telling you, yes, you need to. You certainly need to balance these decisions with other priorities, length of the school year, other opportunities that may present themselves. So there's a whole host of things, but I certainly respect where this issue is brought forward. I think it does. It certainly aligns to our mission, our culture, our ongoing efforts at supporting diversity, and I think it appears to be responsive certainly to community need, but again, there are lots of factors that will weigh into that.
Maybe my questions. So Lorna, I would say, can we as a board try to come up with some kind of guidance or some kind of rules as opposed to just being open-ended?
I think certainly so, and I want to say again, Ethan, appreciate now just as appreciated then, you and others sharing, wanting to be aware of a process and wanting to be intentional with what is being done, and so respect that. I think that in that effort, there are some areas where it's difficult to kind of have a concrete way of doing that, but I think the intent can be pursued, but recognizing that we may have to have some flexibility with
Absolutely.
it. Again, recognizing, but very much appreciate wanting to be intentional with what path forward is taken.
No, we just flexibility is fine. I'm good.
Thank you. Other questions or yes? Claire.
So I appreciate the time that was taken to explore what are some of the data that we can gather. But right from the start, I knew it was violating your privacy to ask what holiday you celebrate, what religion, background, all of that. Also, even looking at attendance, there's some families that will not want to miss school. And so you can't look at past attendance. Sometimes families that might have celebrated Diwali would not want, the child wouldn't want to miss school. So there were just, every time I thought of the different data we could collect, it's very difficult. The data portion that you were looking for, the hard numbers.
I don't expect hard numbers. I wouldn't ask to go in, but somewhere there must be something directional that we can come up with, or some way, and look at what other towns do. So.
Other comments or questions? Gail.
Yeah, I just, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that we spent a month and we sort of are in the exact same position as we were a month ago. My thought was that when we put this sort of on hold, that we were going to come up with some way of trying to determine how to make these decisions. I mean, historically, obviously, you all know that I grew up in this town, and that the Jewish holidays were something that even I, as a student, which was a long time ago, was given off. But the reasoning behind that was because the amount of students at that time and the amount of staff that were calling out on those days was so great that it made it almost impossible to run the schools. So that was the thinking at that time. I mean, again, my comments have nothing to do with Diwali. I'm totally respectful of Diwali and any other holiday that people celebrate. But my concern is that by having no metric and having no way to make this decision, and we are basically in the same place we were a month ago, that this is potentially opens up the door for other people to request holidays off, and that may, sort of create a situation where we're constantly giving people, closing school for holidays. So I feel that to some degree we have to have some way to make the decision, and I guess I'm disappointed that we're here a month later with really the same place we were a month ago. I assumed that we were working on some way to try to make the decision. I'm not saying this is easy. I do get that we're limited on the information we can ask and obtain from people, but historically the reason the Jewish holidays were given off is because the numbers were so overwhelming that it was just almost hard to run the school. And I think that was why it was initially given off.
Thank you. I will share, I don't disagree with you in terms of, boy, where we are now is where we were before. And I think that is a shared thought that we all have, because we were hoping for some kind of concrete brass tacks way. And because of exploring different ways and exploring what data points could be collected, and even conversations with other communities that did establish or did go about it a particular way, it unfortunately resulted in there's no clear-cut way at this time. So certainly receive what you're saying as, what we are where we were before, but it's not without trying to exhaust efforts to see if we could have more specific, tangible means of moving forward. However, respecting what you're saying, and certainly Ethan, with you saying if there's a way for us to establish a process moving forward, that is something that we do want to explore. I think that what we do know, though, is we do know that with respect to the proposed addition of Diwali to the calendar, we do know that coupled with recognizing the populations that make up our community, there is congruence there. And so with respect to the proposed addition of Diwali, that piece, there is substance to support that. However, again, respect the fact of moving forward, if there are other requested additions, how to go about with that. Again, being transparent, don't have a specific answer at this time for other proposals, but with respect to this proposal, do believe that there is information and there are resources to validate that this would be a valued and well-received addition to the calendar. But certainly do hear and respect your comments.
I don't know if this helps. I hear people saying, they're looking for some guidance regarding how to make the decision, and if it's a question of cultural guidance, or numbers and emphasis, that puts all of you in a really awkward position, because then you need to weigh the importance of a cultural issue against the density of a population, and that's a challenge. I mean, I don't know if there's a positive way in which to do that where you're not creating some offense for someone at some point. But in terms of having a metric, I mean, what I would simply tell you is if you look at the calendar as a whole and you consider the impact of any day off and where it lands you at the end of the year, that would be the metric that I might suggest that you consider and maybe have some conversation around. Looking at what is proposed currently with the last day of school being scheduled for June the 11th, it's clearly the midweek of the second full week of June. When we contrast that with this year, and this year the way that the calendar fell for June, and you can just look at it, we had, we're scheduled to have our last day on June the 16th, which actually is kind of like into that third week, and that's just based on how the days fell. June 1st for us this year, in this current year, what is it, on a Wednesday, or we have 2.5 full weeks. So even with snow days, you would need 7 snow days in order to essentially land in the third week of June where we're landing now. That's a potential method by which for you to consider the proposal tonight if you're looking for a method, and realistically looking holistically at the calendar, where does it land you? That could potentially help you. I don't know. I just hear you struggling for a way to make a decision.
So just to clarify, Paul, I'm not looking just for somebody to tell me what the number is. I'm just looking to say we should have a number. So I grew up. There was only one other Jewish family in my school. We obviously didn't get the Jewish holidays off. That was okay with me because I got them off. But I wouldn't expect in that kind of situation that this town should have taken the holidays, because it just didn't make sense. There was 2 families. So I'm just saying we should have one. I don't know what it is. We obviously got to talk about it, think about it, but I just want to make sure the process doesn't become sort of, finger in the air and, oh, that makes sense. And so I just wanted to clarify. So.
Claire.
So when it was proposed, I didn't have a lot of background. I do receive Diwali gifts every year from a colleague. And until I received the Diwali gift, I didn't know what Diwali was. And by doing some research, there are some major districts in the area that now have Diwali off. I think 20% of New Jersey schools, New York City schools. I learned a lot. So by doing the research, I kind of got a little more background that it wasn't just something that came out of the blue. It is being considered a holiday in many towns. The other thing is, I think it's very important that we understand the cultures in our community and what holidays might be something that a family wants to take off but is hesitant because of the impact of missing school, of being able to have that time with their family and not feel guilty about missing classes, maybe exams not being scheduled on religious holiday days that some of our students might take. I think it would be great if we could maybe next year have some kind of education about what are some of the major holidays that are celebrated by some families, and understand a little bit more about how our school schedule impacts their holiday celebration.
Other questions or comments?
I want to make sure that this is not about Diwali for me, but it's just about a general sense of how we make these decisions. I mean, all of you on the board are aware that, since this came out on the calendar, we've had other people contact us about now giving off other holidays. So this is not an issue that's going to go away, because the minute we vote this in, as we're going to take off Diwali, we've already had emails asking for the end of Ramadan, and another holiday that I'm unfortunately not remembering right this minute. But this is something that is going to impact going forward, and that's why I think that Ethan and I feel fairly strongly that there's got to be some way to make the decisions, or it's going to be a never-ending stream of people, especially, when we talk about equity and inclusion. It's going to be very, very hard to say, well, you know what, we're going to put Diwali on the calendar, but we're not going to put, the Aid, or we're not going to put Three Kings Day. So, I think that it's really important that we all kind of think about that while we, decide how to vote on the calendar.
Points well taken. Jason.
Thank you. Really appreciate the conversation here at the board table, and I want to second Claire's suggestion on having more cultural context about holidays that are celebrated in our community. And I mean, I think it's worth stating, it's worth pointing out that the Asian American community in Connecticut has doubled since 2000, and the largest country of origin group in the state is from India. Now, India itself is a diverse country, and not all are Hindu or celebrate Diwali, but it is an indicator, I think, of how diverse our state is becoming. And I appreciate the conundrum, because I think this is an indication that that we have to make ethical choices in a pluralist society, and we have to learn about each other, and I think this is the right approach to do that. I think setting up a particular process might assume particular kinds of arguments or cases for inclusion or removal that I think is perhaps better left open as a welcome mat to think about the cultural life of our town, and the how the schools can support all these every family.
Other comments, questions? Okay. So again, with respect to the motion on the floor, which pertains to the proposed school calendar for 2024-2025, that is the one that we are to vote on. And again, reading the recommendation that the Board of Education accept and approve as a second and final reading the proposed calendar for 2024-2025 school year. All of those in favor? Oh,
I'll make an amendment, and I'm happy to be helped with the wording, that we continue the discussion process to try and come up with some kind of guidelines, not hard, firm numbers.
I'm going to turn your mic on, actually, so others can hear too.
Sorry. That we put in there something that we continue the process of trying to find reasonable guidance as to what should be considered for holidays and what unfortunately is not, I don't know, significant. Feel free to wordsmith, but.
So I hear what you're saying, and what you're saying certainly was highlighted all the more during our discussion. What are your thoughts on, because what you're saying is certainly food for thought of how we can apply the process moving forward. However, with respect to the specificities of the motion, and I just want to see, are you approaching from all or nothing kind of thing, or are you?
I'd rather not.
Okay. So what I may ask that is if we are able to vote on the motion as is read, but again, very much take into account what you were speaking of. I think we collectively want to be able to explore how to establish a process, and that is something that will be food for thought for us moving forward. But with respect to the proposed motion, if we could vote on it as it reads to accepting and approving as a second and final reading the proposed calendar for 2024-2025 school year. Are you okay with that? Next
Yeah,
step?
just as long as we don't drop it.
Nope,
and
yes.
walk away.
Got it.
All right,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, sure. All right. Before we call for the vote again, any other discussion points? Okay. So once again, all of those in favor for accepting the calendar 2024-2025 school year, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? An abstention? Okay, all right. So the ayes have it with 6 ayes and 1 abstention. Thank you. Now moving on to new business, where we have the State of Connecticut Healthy Food Certification 2023-2024. We have Liz Hewitt joining us at the table, and we have a recommendation that the Board of Education adopt the following motions. So it's a bit of a mouthful. So I will just, to be official, I will just read it. The first piece pertains to pursuant to CCSG Section 10-21(5)(f). The Board of Education certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut nutrition standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut nutrition standards during the period of July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. This certification shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, culinary programs, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or non-school organizations and groups. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Renee. Discussion.
Good evening. You have before you our annual healthy food certification. Each year, the board is required to recertify with the State Department of Education that all food items sold to students will meet these requirements. This is the required language in front of you. West Hartford Public Schools has been following the state standard since 2007. In addition to being the right thing to do, we also receive an additional 10 cents per meal served in state grants for adhering to these regulations. We currently serve approximately 850,000 student meals per year, so it's an additional $85,000 for our school nutrition program. It's kind of boilerplate language, but I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Teammates, questions? All right, receiving none. I was going to call for the vote, but we are, so, all right. Well, what I will do is to table the vote for this one, and then we'll look to the next one to propose as a motion. So seeking a motion that the Board of Education will allow, well, first of all, any objections with tabling the vote for the first motion? Okay, thank you. Moving to the next one. The Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet the Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages not listed in Section 10-22 1Q of the Connecticut General Statutes provided that the following conditions are met. The sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. The sale is at the location of the event. The food and beverage items are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, and interscholastic debates or events, but soccer practices, play rehearsals, and debate team meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from the midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Discussion.
Again, this is the boilerplate language from the state of Connecticut. It just details for us when foods that do not qualify under the Healthy Food Certification may be sold, at what time, and under what conditions.
Questions, discussion. With the second motion that is on the table, all of those in favor of what has been stated, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Returning to the previous motion that was read, which has already been motioned and seconded in, and we've had discussion. Let's call for the vote. All of those in favor of the original one, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you. And moving, oh, yes, that's why you're staying put. That's right, okay. So B, revision of authorized signers of ED-099 agreement for child nutrition programs. Seeking a recommendation that the Board of Education designate Paul Vicines as authorized to sign the ED-099 agreement for child nutrition programs and claims for reimbursement, and in his absence, that Elizabeth Hewitt be authorized to sign claims for reimbursement. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ari. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Discussion.
As indicated with the appointment of Paul as our acting superintendent, the State Department of Education requires that you pass a motion to name him as an authorized signer for our nutrition services program.
Thank you. Questions, discussion. All right. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, Liz. Now moving on to C, where there is a motion by Lorna Thomas Farquharson, Jason Chang, and Gail Harris to accept revised bylaws 8355 and 8357 as a first reading. We have a recommendation that the Board of Education accept as a first reading the following bylaws, which were revised by the Board Policy Subcommittee: 8355, meeting conduct / public comment, and 8357, agenda, minutes, and reports, order of business. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Discussion. And so, Jason.
Yes, I'd like to introduce this first reading. We have before the board a revision to policy 8355 and subsequently 8357 to be consistent with the board agenda. So following the norms for public meetings of deliberative bodies such as ours, this policy prioritizes public comment for agenda items only, with the exception of non-agenda items being heard once at the end of first meeting of each month. So most boards of education in Connecticut do not entertain any non-agenda comments, and some allow a single speaker or none at all, regardless of party affiliation of that board. So it may be helpful for the audience to know that public meetings such as ours are governed by what are known as sunshine laws, meaning that it is a private meeting held in the public. So just because it is in the public does not automatically guarantee the right to speak at a meeting. The task of the Board of Education is to carry out our deliberative process in the light of day, which is as it should for democratic societies. Ours is a governing board of elected officials with an agenda that is set by the coordination of the chair and vice chair of the board with the superintendent. So public comment on agenda items is vital to the accountability and transparency of the board. And in this proposed policy, there is no change to the ability for the public to make comments on agenda items. Public comment is an important means to bring voice and lived experience to bear on the choices of the board. So the last 6 months have really shown how tremendously impactful and resolute agenda-related comments have been. So for the majority of speakers this year, the proposed change would have no impact, as the majority of comments have been on the topic of agenda items. So, thank you.
Other thoughts, comments? Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. So the first comment I wanted to make is that the agenda is stating that me and Lorna and Jason are bringing this forward as to a recommendation that we all agreed upon. I want to be very, very clear. There was no agreement on this policy. I do not in any way agree to this policy. I was called to a policy committee meeting on Thursday night. I was entirely blindsided by it. And it made me sort of try to wonder why the heck I am on the policy committee when there was no ability for me to in any way negotiate the policy that's currently being proposed. I want to remind Lorna and Jason that we worked very, very hard in the fall to come up with this current policy. And I stated at that time that this policy was a very good compromise in trying to balance the needs of the board and the needs of the community. And I was proud of the fact that we actually came to an agreement in a bipartisan way, and that we did something that I thought was good for the board and good for the community. We spent multiple meetings on trying to come to that agreement. We had multiple revisions of the policy. We had 2 attorneys involved, and we met multiple times. On Thursday night, we had a 40-minute meeting where the current policy was just simply put in front of me, and that was basically what was the end of that. There was no discussion. There was no attempt to negotiate it. It was done in an executive session for whatever reason. I have absolutely no idea. We're talking about a policy that talks about public comment, and yet it has to be done in executive session. I question what the real reason for that is. I think that this is a huge mistake, and I think that I do not agree with Jason that most Board of Eds in our general area have any policy like this. I've investigated what the policy is in the towns of Bloomfield, Simsbury, Farmington, Avon, and Windsor, what their public comment is, and there is no restriction to agenda items only, and all of those towns allow public comment at the beginning of the meeting. None of them relegate people to wait hours and hours and hours for the end of the meeting for the honor of addressing us for 3 minutes. I have also looked at what the general amount of people speaking at the meetings have been since November. The number of speakers is approximately 4, which is a total of 12 minutes. I think that this is a huge mistake, and I really am recommending and asking both Jason and Lorna to go back to the policy committee with me and to work on something that we can all come out and feel good about. And right now, this is being presented as I am somehow in agreement with what happened Thursday night. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I'll let someone else speak, and then I have a few more comments afterwards. Oh, sorry, let me say one other thing. I'm sorry, Lorna. Jason also said that this really makes no difference to people that want to speak at our board meeting, and that is entirely untrue. We had people speak here at the last meeting. We had multiple parents come here with their young children and address us about a music issue that the board decided to decrease a music position. So 2 things. One is those people would never have been allowed to speak. They'd have to wait till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night so that they could speak to us with their 6-year-olds for 3 minutes. That's not appropriate. we need to be collaborative. We need to be hearing what those people want to say. That wasn't on the agenda, so those people would have been relegated to the end of the meeting. I have a problem with that, and I hope that you all do. I also want to remind everybody on this board that you all voted for the policy that we currently have in November, with the exception of Renee, who was not here, and Ethan, who voted against it. So it was a 6-1 vote. You all were okay with the policy in November. What changed? And I think that if you are going to try to pass this policy, Jason and Lorna, I think you need to explain to everybody why we're passing it. What changed that you have to come 6 months later on a policy that we revised in November and make such a drastic change to drag this community once again? We had a compromise, we agreed to it, and we're going to rip it apart and drag everybody through the mud. I'd like to know what the reason for that is.
Thank you. Thank you for candidly expressing yourself. And if I may respond, 2 points that you made, just to ensure that there is an accurate recount of past events. Even if at the end of the day we agree to disagree, want to ensure that we are agreeing to disagree on events as they occurred. So as we know, with the policy meeting that was had on Thursday, scheduling that date was something that we mutually all agreed upon several weeks prior to, in terms of coming together on that Thursday at 6 o'clock. We had a discussion to come up with that. So we were aware of the policy meeting. We know in terms of the formalities of posting for a policy meeting, those were adhered to, where it was publicly noticed on either, I believe, Monday or Tuesday. It was noted on the website with the location and the time of the policy meeting for all to see and all to bear witness to. So there was appropriate notice given for the public that were aware of the policy meeting. In addition to that, the agenda was noted on the public notice in terms of what was going to be discussed. And we know that also because that was emailed to us in advance. So going into the policy subcommittee meeting, we were aware of what item was going to be referenced and what was going to be discussed. What discussion took place at that time, that may be a matter of us agreeing to disagree. But we do know, yes, there was a portion of time where the meeting was held in executive session, and then we came out of executive session. And what was discussed at that point in time is public knowledge and information. Again, we can agree to disagree, but just want to ensure we are speaking on the same facts as they accurately occurred. Also want to make note, you made a very good point in saying, what about those persons or families that are speaking on items that are not agenda items? This is something that all of us need to be aware of and mindful of. That when it comes to the rules as are being proposed to have just agenda items spoken on, we can vote to suspend the rules. Let's say there is a time, if this motion were to pass, if there is someone that wanted to speak on a subject matter that was not an agenda item, a motion could be made to suspend the rules for that person to speak. And what would be required is we would have to have a 2/3 vote or a supermajority vote of this collective body to allow that person to speak. So I say that to say that if this proposal were to move forward, this policy were to move forward, with it being only agenda items at the beginning, there are opportunities where the rules could be suspended to allow for a person to speak on a non-agenda item, with the majority of the board voting to allow that to happen. So again, just wanted to make sure to include those points. Other comments, discussion points? Certainly.
Thank you. So again, Lorna, I am not here to say how the meeting was publicized. That's not my job. It was publicized. I was entirely blindsided what was going to happen in that meeting, and I'm not going to go back on that because that's what happened. I had absolutely no idea that you and Jason were going to try to revise a policy that we worked hard on in November, that you were going to come and try to entirely squash it. As far as suspending the rules, I do not agree to that, because that would mean that if somebody comes up to that podium and wants to speak about the gender curriculum in our elementary schools, we would have to have a vote here as to whether or not that person would be able to speak. And you know what? I'm not sure what that vote would be. If the person came up and wanted to speak about electric school buses, there might be a different vote. So I don't think that that's a good answer, because it would be entirely dependent on what you want to hear about. And that's not the way a democratic process works. You should be able to sit through 12 minutes to 15 minutes of public comment, even if it's difficult. Nobody forced anybody to be up here. And I shared with you and Jason what's going on with me and people savaging me on the internet. And you know what? I put myself here. I have to handle it. And you all put yourself here. And I think that you can all handle 15 minutes of people speaking to you without making them wait hours and hours with small children so that they can speak for 3 minutes. I am respectfully requesting that we go back to the policy committee and we come back with a policy that all of us can feel good about. You all voted for this policy 6 months ago.
Thank you. Points received. And again, respectfully receive what you're sharing, even if they're points of agreeing to disagree. And we'll see if there are other questions or comments that would like to be made. And I do want to say one piece too, just to be clear, that what is being proposed there's been no mention of personal feelings. We collectively ran for office to advocate for the children and families in our community. And so I just want to be clear that this is not a personal matter. This is a matter of the board. And so it's not about feelings, it's not about what can be received and comments and those lines. We've heard lots of comments. Again, our charge is to service the children and families in our community. And so just want to be clear that that level of objectivity must remain. Other thoughts or comments? Claire.
So I did a lot of reading of all the comments and letters sent, did some research, and I just wanted to share from the U.S. Department of Education, boards must meet at least once a month. Public comment periods are not required by law but are appropriate, and the board should be diligent in assuring public comment takes place at appropriate times in a board meeting. Public comment should enhance rather than hinder the effective transaction of the district's business. Holding a meeting that conforms with the open public meeting means conducting the district's business in public, not having the public conduct the district's business. Therefore, I propose we follow the town council format and allow one meeting a month for non-agenda items. Perhaps the board agenda could be lighter on that night. And the reality is that many residents do not stay after their comments, so I think a compromise would be allowing the comments at the beginning, once a month. This meeting could be long, and although I often have to pay for a sitter, the Board of Ed meetings, I don't think this burden should be placed on a resident who doesn't know when the conclusion of the meeting will happen. On agenda items being discussed, it's critical we hear those comments. We are not censoring with this change, but focusing on the agenda and district business. I listen, read emails, follow up on public comment, research, and I'm regularly accused of not listening and not caring, almost weekly in emails from constituents and also from the podium. Any resident can write, email, volunteer their time, attend meetings called the Board of Ed for meetings, and speak at 20 meetings throughout the school year. I value and I weigh all the feedback I receive.
Thank you. Other comments?
Okay. Let me just say initially, I want to hear more, but I like Claire's idea is better than as an alternative. Anyways, what I wrote before this meeting, it'll stay with, is last fall I voted no to the policy change on the number of individuals that could speak during the public comment section of our meeting. At that time, my question was, what was the problem we were trying to solve? Why the change of policy? It was unclear to me then, and it's still unclear to me, especially now, what problem we're solving. Unlike Scott Swag, who seems comfortable with what's being solved, I don't think so, or he was before. I don't have to agree with the reasons for the change, but I shouldn't be confused as to what the problem is being addressed. Frankly, especially on this, after we've had the policy for just 6 months. My memories of the public comments over the last year have been, among other things, the Smith STEM school teacher budget issue, the music instrument teaching budget issue, a resident proposing more training of teachers and administrators on medical emergencies, the softball field, even though that was last year, and the conditions. That brought visibility. And tonight, where the parents came up from Duffy on the after-school and the before-school programs, all I think are reasonable things to discuss. In some cases, the residents were probably happy with the final outcome. Others, they weren't. But I have to believe in all cases, and I think someone else said it, they were much happier to be able to have their views expressed and be able to explain what their concerns were at the beginning of the meeting when people were focused and listening than when it would be at the end. I might add, in some cases, the speakers were students, kids, as Gail said, which isn't going to happen if they're forced to give their viewpoint at the end of the meeting. So you're going to just knock people out, or people will be less interested in coming. My issue on the subject then and now is that we, as members of the Board of Education, were selected to represent the residents of West Hartford. As part of that responsibility, we should listen to the input of all members of the community, especially that of the parents. Sorry. And where applicable, students. We should be building community trust and encouraging conversation, not destroying it. Pushing the comment period to the end of the meeting indicates a lack of interest, and it certainly doesn't build any trust. We are responsible for managing an educational organization. As an educational organization, it is critical that the organization encourage members of the organization to talk with one another and share different points of view. We see it in the administration. In the last 2 years, I have heard each of Tom, Andy, Paul talk about how they share ideas in their executive meetings and how it helps them in managing the school system. I would assume that we want all the students to be constructively sharing ideas and different concepts with one another. We are sending the opposite message if we don't do the same thing. All successful organizations, whether private businesses, nonprofits, the U.S. military, as well as educational organizations that are successful, encourage the sharing of ideas. I have seen it in private business as well as in the military. Show me an organization that discourages the sharing of ideas and conversation, and you'll see a mediocre organization, which is not what we want for West Hartford schools. By making this change, we send the wrong message to our community and, more importantly, to the students. I don't believe this is the intent, but that is the outcome. It is hard for anyone to see this as encouraging community output by moving the times back. An educational system, more than any other organization, should be welcoming the interchange of ideas and thoughts. And as much as you can argue with that being the wrong intent, the reality is perception is often reality. So I would ask that we not go with the motion, come up with an alternative, whether with going back to the committee, going with or Claire, although I think we need to flesh it out more, but I think there's better answers. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Claire, I want to thank you for trying to come up with some kind of compromise that potentially could alleviate what's going on in this motion. I do want to ask, and I hope Jason and Lorna, you would answer me because I've asked. I want to know what is the impetus for changing this? And I think that, you know, if you're going to make this change or try to push for this motion, I think it should be very clear why we're doing it. And I am not clear why you want to change the motion that we worked on 6 months ago. I also want to say one other thing, and then I hope that somebody could answer that. But, you know, I've given many, many hours of my time to this Board of Education, as I know everybody else sitting up here has. And this is really a big job, way bigger than I ever thought, and probably way bigger than you thought, Claire. And we spent hours and hours here. And in November, we spent, the three of us, hours of time working on this policy. And I just find it a little bit wrong that I've spent hours of my time working on a draft for a policy that we're going to come in after everybody voted for it and 6 months later change it. So then I'm questioning why I'm on the policy committee. Like, what am I doing there? So I would like to know what is the push to change this before we make any changes or any modifications. Why do you want to change it?
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And just want to recognize, you know, this frustration that you're expressing and the time that we've put into this. I do want to start by saying that participation in public comment on agenda items has been the strength of the last year. Hearing about the STEM position, feedback on the STEM position from Smith, and hearing from students about the music position was life-giving. That was tremendous. And those were all on topics that we had a decision to make. And I think I was immensely satisfied by being able to have an audience for the decision that they're advocating for. And in the case of the STEM position, we realized insurance savings that allowed us to fund that position. However, with the music position, there was the realization of a $700,000 shortfall from state reimbursements. But that dialogue was held in the space of people who had come to comment. And so I don't think that we're denying the capacity. I just think that there's inaccurate description of what is happening here. So with regard to the purpose, why revisit this after having gone through this? There is a serious concern about student privacy. As an organization devoted to the protection and education of children, many of the public comments we receive concern individual student matters, which are best addressed by the administration. So in many instances, the administration cannot publicly respond to comments made about individual students due to federal and state privacy laws. So does that mean that we're uninterested in hearing? Absolutely not. But I think to be responsible to those concerns, they are best held in communication with the administration. And I think the biggest sort of source of confidence in that is that we unanimously voted to hire Paul Vacinas as superintendent, whose communication skills were unmatched. And we all agreed on his capacity to handle challenging issues. This policy brings into conformity with other standard practices for governing bodies, including the town council, and to ensure that we're protecting children, we're advancing education, and we're putting people in touch with the problem solvers. That's the purpose.
I just want to respond to that in a couple of ways. When you talk about student privacy, what you, I think, are alluding to is a parent comes up to the podium and wants to talk about an issue that they are having with their child, or something that's going on with their child in a school. And I don't really think that it's the position of the board to tell a parent what they can and can't talk about at the podium. It's not your child, it's their child. And if they want to come up here and share something, I think it's their prerogative to do that. The second thing is that if you allow public comment at the end of a meeting, you haven't really solved that problem. Because if that parent really wants to wait around for 3 hours, they're still going to come up there and talk about it. So you haven't really cut it off. You haven't really made any difference in terms of student privacy. I think parents get to decide what they want to talk about at the podium. I don't think the board decides that, they can't talk about their own students' issues at the board. I think that is really an overreach of the board's power. The second thing you brought up was the music position. Well, you know what? The music position wasn't on the agenda last time we had a meeting here. Yet there were 5 or 6 parents that spoke here with 6 and 7-year-olds. So none of those people would have been able to speak because it wasn't on the agenda, and if they did speak, they'd have to wait till the end of the meeting once a month. That's not appropriate. I want to hear from the parents, and I love, which I hope you all do, when they come up with their kids and they speak with their kids. That's not going to happen at 10 o'clock at night. So you would have cut off that entire discussion with this policy because it wasn't on the agenda. So I think that your reasoning doesn't really hold water here, and I say it in a respectful way. I don't really think it holds water because it's not really changing anything, because you're still allowing public comment until we decide to cut that off at the end of the meeting, and people can still speak about what they want to at that point.
I was going to say the same about Walcott, but I think also even Smith, there was at least one time, and I could be wrong, but where it wasn't on the agenda, but it was still right after it had been on the agenda. So I thought those were great conversations. Again, it gave people a chance to vent. I would also say, in reference to your comment about students, if it's not their kid they want to talk about, then let's address that problem. Let's not address another problem. So if that's an issue, and I'm fine, if we believe that families or, if somebody that's talking about their kid shouldn't be addressed, or we should be able to say to the speakers, you either talk in general terms or you don't talk at all, if that's the issue. So that's all I have.
All right. I don't need to reiterate everything that's been said, but I think that the real crux of the issue with non-agenda items, and this is just me speaking from a personal standpoint, so it was funny when you said it's not a personal thing, but I think it's important to say and express, because nobody here at the table has said it, while I know most people at the table here feel it. So I will voice that. I think for most people over the past few years, public comment has really shifted. I think in the past, it was an opportunity for people to give productive feedback, to have their voice heard by the Board of Ed about things relevant to education, to curriculum, to programming. And what I have seen in my 4 years on the board, that has really shifted. We are not here, especially with non-agenda items, getting feedback, having a cooperative conversation. We can't have a conversation, but there's no collaboration, there's no problem solving that occurs. Really what I feel that non-agenda public comment has become is an opportunity for people who are unhappy with whatever it might be. It's an opportunity to accuse, publicly ridicule, and spread unsubstantiated information. And the problem with that for me, on a personal level, is that because we are not allowed to respond or reply, what is said at that podium is taken as fact, with no opportunity to kind of fact check, if we want to use that term. And what happens is that Board of Ed comments are misinterpreted. They're taken out of context to push some sort of agenda, and we are not able in this position to defend ourselves or correct the narrative. I want to say that tonight there were 2 perfect examples of what I'm referring to. And I applaud you, Ronnie, for getting up and having your say. Unfortunately, anybody at this table is not able to do that. And in this moment, I'm going to correct a wrong. Anita said that my comment was that kids are safer at school than they are in their own home. That was completely taken out of context, and it's been used several times against me in public comment. And for me, I'm going to follow Ronnie's lead, and I'm going to straighten out that comment. The comment that I made was specific to SEL gender identity curriculum. What I said, when I am a proponent of the SEL curriculum, is that in some cases, children's homes are not the safe place, and it is not a safe space for them. And sometimes school is the only place they have that is a safe space, an accepting space, an inclusive space. And those were my comments. It had nothing to do with bookshelves falling on children or things happening and children getting hurt at schools. It had nothing to do with that. And that would never be my comment. But it has been used time and time again by several people who come to public comment and use that as some sort of weapon against me. And I don't have the opportunity to defend myself either publicly, privately, wherever it might be, and right that wrong. And that is the issue with public comment, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, is that I am open to feedback. I am one who looks in the mirror. I take accountability. But when my character is being questioned publicly and I don't have the opportunity to explain myself or defend myself, that doesn't feel right, and that doesn't feel good either. So I think non-agenda items, if they're not going to be productive and we are not going to have the opportunity to right the wrong, and it becomes the narrative that the entire town hears, I think that is inappropriate. And that's my concern with non-agenda public comment.
Claire. So Ethan, when you brought up what you thought was great public comment, they were all agenda items. No, you gave some scenarios of the different things. And what I want to just say is, I love children. I love teaching. I'm a good mom. I'm a good person. I do nothing as harmful that I know is harmful. And since I've been on the board, I have read such awful, accusatory, nasty things. I am sad that we have high school students that have to sit through some of the things that are said. The emails that I receive, I wouldn't let my daughter read. I don't think people understand the kind of cruelty and lack of civility. So I am proud to serve on the board, but this has been a tough 2 years, and I'm even hesitant to say it because now they're going to say, oh, Mrs. Nezzarella has a heart and we can get to her. But it is awful. And I did not know that serving on the board would cause this many people, kind people, people I know are repeating emails with nasty warnings, daring things. It's just wrong. I'm very sad. I love this town. We have amazing schools. We have incredible people that teach our children. And our children are award-winning, and it is not the horrible place that we keep hearing about in open, non-agenda items.
Gail.
So, Claire, I want to respond to that. I totally hear you, and this is a tough job. I am with you. I had absolutely no idea what this was going to be like on many levels. And I shared with Lorna and Jason in the policy committee that somebody has gotten a hold of my Facebook picture and a picture of my own children and has plastered it all over Facebook on multiple sites in multiple towns, saying the most defamatory and derogatory things about me, which are, in my opinion, entirely not true. And I am in no way trying to belittle what you're saying, because I'm in the same situation in a different context. But at the end of the day, we all signed up for this. And given what the politics are in our country now, and the disgusting things going on, I don't think that anybody should be surprised that we're going to be a target of it as well. I'm not condoning it. I think it's horrible. It's happening to me. It's happening to you. It's probably happening to everybody. But nobody forced us to be here. And I think that the answer to what is going on is not to try to stop people from talking. I understand the difficulty of sitting here and having to listen to some of these comments. I do understand when it's a personal attack, but I do not believe that that is the way to solve it. And truthfully, I don't think we're solving it, because we're still going to allow public comment at the end of a meeting until we decide to, shut that down too. I think that we have to be able to hear the people that want to come and speak here, and we are elected by these people, and we owe them the courtesy of being able to address us for 3 minutes in a timely way without having people wait hours and hours and hours.
Other comments?
Yeah. So, to clear an Ari, I am sorry you're being attacked. Being attacked, I don't see it, but if it's happening, it's happening, so I'm sorry. At the same time, I don't think that should eliminate free expression. I will say the couple items that came up during non-agenda items was, I specifically remember last year the softball field issue coming up, and I remember going back to Andy and I think Ann or whoever was presenting, because it didn't get presented in the capital budget when we came back for the year, and asking the question. I would have never asked the question unless it surfaced. The Duffy situation, I'm interested. I don't know what the right answer is. So the attacks don't help anybody, and if anything, they're a negative, and I cringe when I hear them. And again, I'm sorry. I don't know why they're happening or why people want to think they're helping themselves. But we shouldn't penalize the majority for some few. So that's just my point.
Thank you. I was going to comment, but please do go. No, go right ahead. That's all right.
So I would like to again respectfully request that we go back to the policy committee, Lorna, Jason, and I, and we try to rework this so that we can find a balance that will help, the needs of the board and respect the needs of the community. I'm not opposed to making changes to the policy that we have, but I cannot agree to the current policy the way it's written. So I'm asking for that to please happen.
All right, so thank you all. This was a discussion and a first reading, so there is no vote today. I do want to say before we pause on this and go to our next agenda item that, again, the proposed policy is speaking in regard to public communication, but not at all speaking about hindering public communication. It is speaking about prioritizing agenda items. Again, it's not about hindering or stopping public communication. It's important to say that, because when it is presented differently, that can linger and become a narrative of its own. Also want to be clear that there are no steps moving towards eliminating in totality public communication. We are just looking to modify with continuing to prioritize agenda items exclusively and having non-agenda items at the end of the first meeting of the month. However, as I stated, there is an opportunity for rules to be suspended to allow for non-agenda items to be spoken of. And some great examples were given here that would warrant just that opportunity. I also do want to say that I don't want any time when a person is speaking passionately, speaking from an introspective stance, for that to be viewed as a woe is me, or viewed as thoughts or decisions are being made from an emotional state. I think we collectively are human beings, and it's important to be self-aware of how we think and how we feel, because that does influence choices that we make. So I don't want anyone to think that by sharing feelings that they have, that minimizes the rationality of decisions and words that are being said. And collectively, in various forms, you made reference to, others have made reference to experiencing ridicule, judgment, persecution, non-truths being said publicly, not only locally, but on a national level. On a website, a national website, where your picture is posted, where you are encouraged, or rather viewers from across the country are encouraged to contact you to say this or to say that. We've all experienced some shape, form, or fashion of that. However, that does not override why we are here, what our charge is, and to ensure that we make decisions grounded in rational thought. And so with that, we're going to pause on this. We'll come together again for a second reading. Gail, your points are well taken in terms of wanting to see how we can discuss and collectively review. But as of now, this has been the first reading of this proposed policy. With that, we now will move on to staff. We will now move on to staff communications. Well, I don't want to cut off. I'm not cutting off, but I did ask again, were there any other comments? So before we continue on, other comments?
Your comments?
Certainly.
So, realizing this first reading, if you're going to make exceptions, I think it would be good to spell them out as opposed to doing them on the fly. So if you're saying we'll make an exception because it's small kids, then let's have the rules stated. So otherwise, I think it would just be a problem with the speaker and it cause more conflict than necessary. So I still am against the concept, but if you're going to do it, I'd like to see it done to the best. So that's all I have to say.
You know, Lorna, I'm asking that we go back to the policy committee. The next meeting is only 2 weeks from now. And my sense is that you're not really open to that idea because I've asked several times and, you know, I think that Claire made has a fair idea here to make this more palatable. So I am asking again that we go back to the policy committee and try to revamp this in the next 2 weeks. I'm not, hearing that you're really open to that idea.
I respect your senses, but if you are directly asking if we can come together as a policy, yes, we can. So I'd much rather concrete specifics versus sensing, but I appreciate that. And so with that, those are things that we can offline try to schedule something along those lines. All that has been said is always well received and respected, even in those moments if we ultimately agree to disagree, but do appreciate the candid way in which thoughts are stated. We did. We did. We voted to accept it. Oh, correct. Yes, thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you. This is why teamwork is important. And so, yes, we did have the first reading as a motion that was seconded. However, we need to vote it as a first reading. And so with that, there have been different points, different suggestions made. The one suggestion was to modify the motion modify the policy where instead of having it be non-agenda items at the end of the first meeting of the month, to have that to go to the first meeting of the month.
No, to go to the beginning.
The beginning, pardon me, to go to the beginning. So instead of the end of the meeting, to go to the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
Correct. So essentially what we have now, in place now, which is where agenda items are prioritized, followed by non-agenda
The town
items.
council has a public comment once a month, so that non-agenda items. At no meeting can people speak on non-agenda items at town council. It always has to be agenda, but there's a public comment session once a month.
So with that, the way that we have it now, it is at the beginning of the meeting, agenda items prioritized, followed by non-agenda items. What you're proposing is to keep it that way, whereas the second meeting of the month, it would just be agenda items alone. And what you're proposing is, with that, there would be no public comments at the end of the meetings. Because as of now, the way that it's proposed, the first meeting of the month is agenda items at the beginning, non-agenda items at the end. The second meeting of the month, agenda items at the beginning, and there's no public comment at the end of the meeting.
Correct. So from the research I did, we are conducting the district's business in public, and that we need information about the district's business before we talk about the agenda items, but once a month, the first meeting possibly, and then we could set the agenda so that the heavier agenda is not on that night.
Sorry, just want to raise a point of order. I don't think we vote on the first reading.
No.
Right.
We don't vote on the first reading, but the more that we discuss and come up with something that might be voted on next time,
Right.
the better we get all voices in that process.
Right. Gotcha.
I mean, this is why I think that we should go back to the policy committee and take Claire's ideas and talk about them in a policy committee, not here at the board, because I think it's hard to do it this way.
So I think what would have to happen correct, there's no voting on the policy per se. However, if we do look to add language or to amend the current proposed policy, that we do have to vote on to add that language to the first reading. And so I believe that is, I don't have Mr. Roberts right next to me, but I do believe that is what would have to happen. Robert's Rule of Order, yes.
Jason said.
Yes. So
why can't we go back to the policy committee and then bring this revised motion at the next meeting?
If I understand what you're discussing, I think if you go back to the policy committee and you make a substantial change, you'll need 2 readings. If you're looking to make a motion to simply amend this first reading here in the here and now, so that you could bring that amendment forward as a second reading, I think that's what I'm overhearing Claire say.
I think we just vote to accept the first reading and then we take it from there. It's getting complicated.
So thank you, Paul. Yes, I do believe that is the case. And so what I'm going to ask for us to do is to move ahead with voting on this as a first. We did, I'm just pausing with that because we have it, we don't have to vote on it.
It looks like you can change one word and you're good.
Okay.
Because you have, may address the board for 3 minutes at the beginning of any meeting, and at each member of the public wishing to speak regarding a general matter within the authority of the board may address the board for 3 minutes at, or that word end, we can change that following agenda item presentations. So just take the word end and change it to after agenda item comments.
Claire, I just want to clarify. You're stating that once a month at the beginning of the meeting, we'll be open to non-agenda items, not prioritizing agenda items. Is that
Right. And part of what I want to share is I knew well aware of all the softball issues weeks before the public comment. I also knew about the Duffy situation 2 weeks ago. So public comments aren't the first time we hear about things. And we follow up on things, and I make phone calls about things. So there's a lot of things that we receive through email that this, the general meeting is the first time people hear about some of these things, but we've been hearing about them in emails. I've been calling Paul or Andy about them before these public comments because the constituents are continually sending us emails. So this is not, censoring in that sense. We still are hearing what the people are writing to us and the letters that are being written. PTOs are getting information. Volunteers are sharing things. Principals are meeting with parents. So there is a lot of avenues of communication beyond this area. What I'm saying is prioritize one meeting a month that the public knows that the first Tuesday, if they have an issue, they want to come. And I hope that people start coming with suggestions, or maybe they like something about our district. That would be nice to hear, but we don't hear from the happy people. we don't hear from the people who think things are good.
That's kind of life, but.
What I may, excuse me.
So,
So with that piece, what I would suggest with what is being proposed language-wise is that if it were to be moved to the beginning of the meeting, it still would have to follow the policies where it is 3 minutes per person and 7 minutes, 7 individuals to speak on a subject matter. And we do have it with the current policy where there are 10 individuals, up to 30 minutes of public communication. And so if we were to reach that because of agenda items, that, again, in accordance to current policy, would not allow for general comments. But again, with what you're saying.
they could be at the end.
They could be at the,
What I'm understanding from Claire is that it would be similar to what we have now, except for there would be, on the second meeting of the month, there would be no non-agenda item public comment. So the first meeting would exist as it is now, agenda, non-agenda, and then sometimes at the end of the meeting if there's anyone additional. And then the second meeting in the month would be agenda only, and that would be it. Is that my? Yeah. Okay.
So with that, it would read then, the board welcomes public comment as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to the board on matters within the board's authority. Each member of the public wishing to speak regarding an agenda item or items may address the board for 3 minutes at the beginning of any meeting, and each member of the public wishing to speak regarding a general matter within the authority of the board may address the board for 3 minutes after agenda items of the first regular meeting of each month, and then so on and so forth with what is stated. Is that what? So with that, so I'm going to ask then for that to be a motion to be made for the current motion to be amended to reflect what was just stated. And then we would have to have a second, and then yes.
That way you can have your policy meeting, but if this comes back to meeting in 2 weeks, which is our last of the year, we can vote. We have to have something that we can vote on.
Correct. Well, if the amended motion were to pass, then as a first reading, that means the next time we come together, it would be a second reading. I think that what you were suggesting for a policy meeting would be to try to see how we can amend the language. But if we're able to amend it at this meeting and to vote on it, then that would allow for that to constitute a first reading, and we would then come together for a second reading.
This is a first reading. In 2 weeks, could it be called the second reading because we amended tonight?
Correct. Yes.
Yes, and then we can vote on a second reading.
Correct, yes.
I think you want to define your exceptions, though, because you've made reference to them several times. I think it should be on paper, because if you just do it ad hoc, I think you're going to have it's minor in the whole scheme of things.
Well, if we make note of it now, and it is documented now, we'll submit that for the record for the amended piece. That would constitute as a first reading. This would constitute as a first reading if we agree to the amended motion. And so I'm going to pass it to you to formally present the amendment, the proposed amendment.
So I propose that we change public meeting comment 8355, the new first reading, to have the word "at the end" replaced with "after agenda items," so that once a month we will have public comment, and once a month we will have only agenda item comments.
With that motion, is there a second?
Sorry.
Oh, discussion. Let's, we have to have discussion. But first, we have to have a second, and then we can have discussion on the amended motion. So is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right.
This policy proposal is actually 2 policies because it is also about the agenda order. So.
Correct. The amendment that's on the floor would pertain to the initial part of the policy.
Right. We would then have to adjust the other one. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's all right. Correct, yes. Right. Because the second piece of the proposed policy acknowledges how we have a standing agenda items for meetings. Mm-hmm. And as of now,
So for
on page 7?
Page 7.
And so with what has been proposed for the policy, One was the language of the actual proposed policy. The second was changing to section 8357 in our packets, that's on page 7, and where it says for number 10, public comments concerning general matters, first regular meeting of the month. If this proposed amendment does pass, then we would then have to adjust this. But I think that is something that I don't think we'd have to vote on. That would just be reflective of the change at hand.
If I may, that would just mean taking your new language and moving it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just moving on to item 4.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure we.
No,
covered.
understand, yes. So any other discussion with the proposed motion on the floor, amended motion on the floor?
So my question is, on the day where we're listening to non-agenda items, are we still going to prioritize agenda items on that day? Okay, so then we are really cutting back a fair amount of the ability of the public to comment, because now one meeting, they can't speak at all, and on the other one, we're still prioritizing agenda items.
However, in the grand scheme of things, recognizing that as has been shared not only tonight, but when we first voted on the policy and information was given of neighboring towns and communities as how their boards are governed, we still have one of the most liberal formats in terms of our public communications and the opportunities for speaking. And so that, I respectfully hear what you're saying, but it still is more public communications than is offered with other board meetings, other towns.
I need to respectfully disagree with that. That is not really, I think, accurate. I think that the surrounding towns do not in any way limit public comment to agenda items, and I've researched this. I mean, I'm happy to hear from somebody else who's looked at it, but it is just simply not accurate to say that. The surrounding towns do not limit public comment to agenda items. What they do limit is the amount of time that can be spoken.
That's what I'm speaking of. That's what I'm speaking of in totality in terms of the opportunity for public communications.
Right. But not all of them, but there are some that do.
From what I gather, again, what was shared with us when we first voted on this, we offer the most opportunities for public communications out of neighboring districts. We offer the most opportunities, recognizing we have 2 board meetings, by history, 2 board meetings a month, and by history we had public communication at the beginning of each meeting and at the end of each meeting, which meant 4 opportunities of public communication per month. That by far exceeds what other boards, how they were governing in terms of their opportunities for public communication. Any other discussion with the amended motion on the floor with respect to the policy? All right, let's vote on the proposed, on the amended language, yes. Not on the policy, but just on adding, correct, yes. All of those in favor, say aye.
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 All of those opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
3 abstentions. Okay. So it does not pass. The amendment does not pass. So.
4-3. 4-0-3. It's fine with me. I mean, because you got 4 votes, I thought.
4 for yes and 3 abstentions.
Okay, that is a majority. All right. So, yes, it passes. All right. With that, we do have the first reading. So what was shared is the first reading, and we'll come back for a second reading. All right, let us continue on. And with that, now to, a wonderful time, passing it now for our staff communications and reports. We're going to receive our superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. So first, I want to just lead with, honestly, a compliment to you as an entire board for the dialogue. I mean, I know that you had a lot of technical pieces you just closed with, so maybe it lost some of its momentum, but really, there was a lot of courage and candor in balancing, I think, some genuine competing sort of values that I think you share collectively, and just how to balance those. So I'm sitting here watching it, and I just wanted to say that. On a lighter note, I wanted to update you that I've recently become an authorized signer on the child nutrition program, so very proud for that. I did want to give a shout out. I heard it mentioned about Teacher Appreciation Week. It was also Nurses Appreciation Week. So just a big shout out to all of our teachers, all of our nursing professionals that do what they do on a daily basis to support kids and to help our schools running. So just a happy thought there. That was last week, obviously. I think I shared with the board through an email, but for the public, that West Hartford was chosen to take part in a unique Bureau of Rehabilitative Services and Department of Developmental Services collaboration opportunity to benefit our students serviced under our Pupil Service Department. We are one of only 9 districts total across the state to take part in this pilot program that targets early intervention and work-based learning experience for students aged 17 to 19. So we're very, very pleased by that pilot. That will be beginning this summer, and certainly more to share as that relationship matures and we learn more about that. There have been a couple of topics that have been addressed that have been some conversations here at the board table, and I wanted to give some life and some spirit to them in my update. The first of which relates to mental health specifically. And it's a topic that's timely because as we've shared, through our budget conversations, as you've heard a formal report from our pupil services team, we do continue to see a rise in the number of risk assessments. And the trend that we see is that those surface not necessarily in a density of a small group of students having more issues, but they're more spread out widely across a broader range of students. And this trend is not, as you know, is not in any way, shape, or form unique to West Hartford. It's not unique to Connecticut. It is a heightened focus across the state and across at the national level. And so getting to sort of the background as our engagement with the DESA, which is an assessment tool put forward by Aperture. DESA itself is a strength-based assessment of behaviors that relate to social emotional well-being that helps us and our teams in identifying interventions and supports, including documenting progress over time with students in learned skills. We're in the second year of implementation with DESA, and I know there have been questions, so I wanted to just share a little bit about it. First and foremost is a little bit more background. The DESA itself is a universal screener, so very similar to universal screeners that we have for literacy and mathematics. There are screeners for student behavior, and it is part of federally mandated responsibilities and Connecticut's guidelines in response to those mandates relative to having a response to intervention model that is based on scientifically research-based interventions and screening tools. Historically, for a very long period of time, because SRBI and response to intervention, also known as RTI, goes back, quite a distance of time. Historically, the state had allowed for just common school-based measures to use, and that's what we relied on for a very long time because we didn't have a singular district measure. In fact, when you look at our behavior programs and our character education models, there was variety of cross schools with a couple that were kind of in common. Certainly PBIS you've all heard of. I imagine you've heard of Second Step. We've talked a lot about it, and some others. With this heightened focus, the state of Connecticut has basically been promoting and looking to research a tool that might be used in common and across districts, and so that is how our partnership evolved. And we do expect additional guidance to be coming out from the state as this need continues to surface. I did want to share the tool itself because I've heard folks, and I want to be responsive to public on this issue, kind of questioning it, and I haven't gotten the sense from what I've heard when folks have spoken on this that there's necessarily a clear understanding. So the DESA tool outlines a common set of skills that support students' relationship building, self-regulation, and problem-solving abilities. That's what it is. The skills that it targets are very well aligned with our established social emotional learning, our social skills development, and the report card indicators that we've had in place for many, many years. Specifically, the questions asked on the DESA, and they're not asked of students, they're asked of teachers, the frequency with which you might see a student, and they talk about things like decision-making, goal-directed behavior, optimistic thinking, personal responsibility, relationship skills, self-management, and social awareness. The beautiful thing is all of these are teachable skills. So when a student when a teacher is reflecting on each student, and that's really what the DESA is for, it's for an assured opportunity for a teacher to think about each individual child and reflect on what's the frequency with which I see a student being socially aware. And if they're not, then we have tools that can be suggested within the Aperture Toolkit or within our own second step or our own curricular materials that say, here are some ideas by which we might support that. In fact, when we had our elementary counselor presentation, the counselors have done a crosswalk of the lessons that they teach as part of a school counseling curriculum and the skills that we would target. And they have what I would call classroom-based interventions or tier one, or just good ideas for teachers as to what to do if you needed to step in. And that could be something as easy as assigning someone kind of a lunch buddy that they might partner with to work on social skills, helping them with conflict resolution if that were the issue, and the case goes on. So I wanted to just be able to give very briefly that background, as I know it's been a question, and something that we found is really supporting what we've seen as this trend of dysregulation with students at large, and helping to support them. I know you've also had some questions about curriculum review, so I wanted to give an update about that process. I believe the question has come up regarding board's responsibilities, and it is very true that each local and regional board of education need establish a school district curriculum committee, and that committee recommend, develop, review, and approve all curriculum for the district. So as I did want to make sure that everyone did understand on the board that we do have such a committee. You have met that statutory obligation. It's called the Curriculum Council. It is our school district committee. The Curriculum Council is comprised of a group of standing members and a group of ad hoc members. The standing members are typically members of the curriculum office who have expertise in curriculum writing, national standards, and things of this nature. And the ad hoc committee is formulated based on whatever the curricular area or program is that's under review. So just to give some more life to what that means is on a cyclical basis, typically on a 5-year cycle, each curricular area and each program area will go under self-assessment. And that self-assessment is undertaken by those under the supervision of the instructional leaders. So if I were using, for instance, the most recent, which was elementary literacy, we just did a curricular review spurned specifically by the K-3 reading mandates that came out. So we needed to see the degree to which we were in compliance with the Science of Reading mandate. So there was a team that spent 6 months performing a self-assessment. When those curriculum reviews are juried or heard or listened to, we pull together from the standing committee, will pull together ad hoc members who have expertise in that area as well, who wouldn't be on the vertical team or who are in related areas. So if literacy were my example, we may have assistant principals whose certification was within language arts, so they're very familiar with the content area. We bring them in as ad hoc members. We may have other members who collaborate with and who, for which there are integration opportunities, folks in the humanities. And then we have members of pupil services, English as a second language, folks who are going to have intersection with that curricular area, and so they help to form an ad hoc committee. And they will hear that curriculum review and then be able to provide feedback to it. The process itself, the curriculum review, the self-assessment, is framed around 5 indicators: content, skills, and understandings, which is essentially the guts of curriculum and its alignment to national standards; maps, units, pacing, guide development, so the sort of the written curriculum, how well it's documented and how well it serves our teachers; assured learning experiences, so things that we can point to and say, as a result of instruction, every student will have an exposure to this, whether that be a process or a product; data and assessment, the measures of how students are performing, what we know about the curriculum; and then lastly, curricular alignment, so how it vertically aligns pre-K through 12, or how it aligns across other disciplines. And also, of course, the alignment between the written, taught, and tested curriculum itself. All right. As I mentioned, there are parallel processes for programs, things like speech and language, physical and occupational therapy, things of that nature. And so and we are in the process of adjusting our curriculum review calendar, if I'm being transparent, based on interruptions that we saw to our typical process when we were in the COVID years. We kind of had to arrest a lot of the curriculum we were doing as when we were in the pandemic, and it takes a while for that ship to right itself to get everybody back on track to a 5-year cycle. So I wanted to provide you those 2 updates as well. Very important for the public to know and for you to know where we are with some administrative staffing positions. I did send out a notice, an email to all West Hartford families announcing our own Dr. Haskins will be leaving us at the end of this year, so we are seeking applicants to try to fill very large shoes for our Director of Equity Advancement. With the appointment of Ann McKernan, we have an opening for the Director of Secondary Education. I know that Mr. Duarte, our Director of Human Resources, went out and had communication with Brayburn families today as we are engaged in the search for Brayburn. We also have a principal search happening at Smith STEM School with the retirement of Teresa Giolito. And we have an administrative opening within a pupil services department supervisor with the retirement of Ted Dillon. So these are all processes that are ongoing. I have some celebrations to share. I will not repeat those given by our students, but I do want to give kudos to Emily D. Michelle and Bennett Johnson for musical performances that enhanced the West Hartford Police Department's 2nd annual National Police Week ceremony that happened earlier this week, I believe, or last week. I'm pleased to see their community engagement, and I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our law enforcement professionals for what they do to protect and serve our community with honor, pride, and courage. We had 6 teachers, 3 parent volunteers, and a community business partner that were all recognized for their support and contributions to the arts at the Connecticut Arts Administrator Association Advocacy Breakfast this past Thursday. On Wednesday, May 3rd, the 3 middle schools collaborated to offer an event to parents and students to explore the impact of social media and the power of language, something timely that I just heard all of you discussing. Parents and students had the opportunity to talk together about their learning and their understanding of the risks and strengths of social media, and thanks to the panelists, Morgan Miali from, apologize if I'm mispronouncing names, Bristow 8th grade, Arena Zahn, Sedgwick 7th grade, and Marin Saxton, King Philip, grade 8. Connecticut History Day honors went out to Luke Kalki, Sedgwick 8th grade, 2nd place junior individual documentary category. He's qualified for National History Day. And Carolyn Wentland, 7th grade from Sedgwick, who placed 3rd in the junior individual exhibit. We had a great Open Choice Spring Family Festival at Bushnell Park just following our last board meeting. The event was very well attended by families and by schools, and very happy for that. Not only was it Teacher Appreciation Week, it is also Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, the month of May. Time for us to celebrate and recognize the many contributions of the AAPI community. As a school and a community, we believe it's important to acknowledge the diversity of our students and their cultural heritage, and this month prioritizes or provides an opportunity to highlight the culture, history, achievements of them. Folks can look on our website and access resources and materials. And there are conversations that are being encouraged in the classrooms as well as in homes with information for parents to take a look. Lastly, I want to give some highlights for some upcoming events. West Hartford Teacher of the Year announcement will be coming up on May the 19th. As you heard, we have spring concerts happening across all of our schools, but the big one is the Inter-El Festival at the Bushnell this May 23rd. If you have interest to invite a guest, get in touch with me. We have additional tickets we can make available. School awards programs are ongoing throughout the week of May 30th. We have the Military Inductee Dinner on May 30th. The Mentor Program Celebration Breakfast on June 1st, the Equity and Diversity Council and One Community End-of-Year Celebration at Gastro Park in the late afternoon, early evening of June 1st. And we also have an ESOL outreach team who is partnering with Vivian Rinaldi of the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District to host an information session for Portuguese families on a host of topics relating to health, community services, and educational programs. Hall High School today had the Marine Corps Fitness Challenge, and last but not least, you've all received an invitation to the Quest Showcase on Monday, June 5th at Charter Oak at 6 p.m. That is my report. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, questions or comments regarding the superintendent's report? Yes.
Thanks. So Paul, I wanted to ask about the DESA because I've actually asked for that to be an agenda item on the agenda for quite a while. So my first question is that where does the information...
At that point, I would imagine that there's a handoff of, here are some of the things I'm noticing, and it's not necessarily the DESA, but it would be the same conversation that we were having if we were seeing behaviors of concern, and I was going to go to the school psychologist and say, hey, I want to have some conversation with you. I've got some concerns about Paul. These are the kinds of behaviors that I'm seeing manifest in my classroom. I'm wondering if I can get help with that. I'm wondering if, and these would be the similar kinds of conversations that we've historically always had with a parent.
So let me rephrase the question a little bit differently. I'm wondering, where is the information being stored? Is that only in the West Hartford Public Schools would have access to that, or is that being like a third party?
Okay, I understand. So anytime that there's a data warehousing platform, because we don't necessarily own the data warehousing platforms, those are contracted. There are privacy, and that is my understanding of how that is held with the DESA information. Similarly, for pretty much a fair amount of our school-based data, there are very strict privacy regulations that the state of Connecticut requires in order for any company to do business with a public school. So yes, there is a third party. Different is sort of stopping and asking the same questions across every single school, trying to essentially calibrate teachers on when you're answering that question. We're going to all ask the same questions, and you're just sort of gauging frequency.
So, I mean, my understanding is that there's a small amount of questions that the teachers fill out on each student, but if the student then fails that initial test, then that opens up a package of like 70 questions that the teacher now has to answer on the student. So my question is basically, and again, I'm not familiar with what the questions are, and I guess if someone says, how well does the student stay on task, that's kind of generic, but I guess I'm wondering, like, is the teacher really qualified to start answering 75 questions on what seems to be, and again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but seems to be to some degree like a mental health type of evaluation?
Well, yeah, and that's why I would want to clear up any confusion that it be a mental health evaluation, if that is the perception, because I wouldn't qualify it as that. Here's a sample question. It's 8 questions.
Okay.
How often does the student show appreciation of others? So it's not a test. I heard you say, like, if a student fails on a test. So this is not a singular day occurrence. This is very similar to when a teacher's filling out, again, progress report on a student, a report card. They're reflecting back all of those kind of social skill indicators. They didn't have a specific test, so it was really a reflection of what have I seen over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks relative to student behavior, and let me advise the family through the report card of the student's progress on that. Yes, with and I think we use a 1, 2, 3 scale, which is something like with great frequency, most of the time, or only some of the time. And I'm paraphrasing. I think it's limited. It's 1, 2, 3, or they have L, M, P, and different things. But it's essentially that spirit. So these are very similar questions. With what frequency does the student make a suggestion or request in a polite way? That's one of the 8 questions, right? So it's 8 simple questions. If there's, so it's not a question of passing or failing, but if there's a specific area where there's a skill that needs to be addressed, the teacher can then, have a structured way by which, hey, maybe I want to be working on that because I've noticed, I noticed it was at this baseline, and I noticed that if I really think about it, if I take a moment, this child isn't necessarily progressing at the same rate as the rest of the children. So maybe I need to pair them up with a lunch buddy. Maybe we need to I'm going to read a story to class that day, and I'm going to make sure that I'm engaging that student some way in what polite talk is versus taking turns, things of that nature. Support from school clinicians as necessary.
Okay. Is it possible to get those, you could send me what those questions are?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share, and I make sure that I'm not sharing any proprietary information. I'm saying some of it out loud, but I'm pretty certain there's information that's out there that's just publicly available on the web, and I can provide those links to the board.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments in response to our superintendent's report? Yes, Renee.
I just want to thank you about presenting on this. It's helpful to see that we're using a recognized instrument across the district so that we're able to compare across schools. So that was something that I learned. So it's helpful to know that we're being consistent and measuring in the same way with a nationally recognized and tested.
And 19 end-of-year retirements, which is actually fairly consistent with what we would expect. That puts us at a turnover rate of approximately 4%, which is also a typical number for us. And again, that is primarily made up of retirees. As always, we anticipate some summer resignations as we go on with the process. But I did want to just take a brief moment to pause here and recognize some truly amazing and dedicated staff members who have, many of them, definitely on behalf of the board, I want to thank them. In terms of staff recruitment, as I mentioned last week, I am really pleased with our where we are in the process right now. I actually was just looking at my calendar, and I have 7 people on for tomorrow. So we have been very busy, but that's a really good thing for us, and really, and so just to hear their true dedication to being here, and some of them doing different and having different sacrifices to be able to make this happen. So I think that still is a real testament to who we are and ultimately what our draw is for folks in the profession. And like I said, I certainly get to reap those benefits. I know that Mr. Vycinas took some of my thunder with our new hires, or I should say our openings, our leadership openings. So we are working very, very hard to get our admin openings filled. Looking at the candidate pool today, just really, really impressed with our candidate pool, which again, I'm not surprised. But we have some very, very strong candidates, and I know that our hiring committees have a lot of work ahead of them to make sure that they find the perfect candidate. So we have sent out surveys for our Brayburn and our Smith principal openings, so we've had a good turnout from the community as well as from our staff, and I have spent half a day over at Brayburn meeting with individual staff members that wanted to, and actually spent half a day today over at Smith meeting with faculty members and staff as well. And I can tell you at both of those schools, it is without question the dedication that each and every one of those professionals have, but also just each of those schools is just special in its own way and has a real place in the folks' heart that go there. So I had some committee meeting this morning, or I guess focus groups with parents/caregivers for Brayburn, and I had one right before this meeting, which is why I apologize for being a little late. And same thing, and tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, then tomorrow night, I'll have focus groups with our Smith parents and caregivers. So I think all of this is really just giving me a really good appreciation for what we're looking for exactly in our next leader at each one of these schools. And I am, again, extremely confident that we will find the right person that comes and brings the energy and the passion that both of those schools deserve. And certainly we've got a couple other openings, our Director of Equity and our Director of Secondary Education, which, as we've gone through those applicants too, again, not surprised, some really strong candidates. So we've got our work cut out for us, but all really, really good and positive things. So without further ado, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you for that update. Questions or comments? Claire?
Yeah, so you mentioned the 16 resignations and 19 retirements is not a out of the ordinary number.
Correct. And that's obviously with this. We've had some other folks that announced earlier, so the number is a little bit bigger than that. But again, nothing that is alarming to me. And certainly as I've met with folks and sort of asked the why, there's no theme that wouldn't be expected.
Then how common or how often are there transfers where teachers in one elementary might want to move to another elementary or request a grade level transfer?
Sure. So we have a process for that where I'll send out essentially a survey to the entire staff where people can fill it out and let us know, hey, I'm looking for a change in either grade level or school or whatever it would be. And so then we actually get together. So the elementary principals and I, as well as with some other folks, get together and we look at the whole puzzle. And to be honest with you, there's not oftentimes a lot of requests to leave schools. And so if we can honor that, we certainly look at that and try to do that. But, particularly this year, we really haven't had a tremendous amount of folks requesting that. And those that did, it was for various reasons, and most of it was just to try a different grade level or things like that.
Other questions or comments in regard to our personnel report? All right, before you depart, I do just want to say, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn on behalf of the board here, that although last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, we certainly recognize and appreciate all of the teachers year-round. So thank you, all of our educators that are here. Thank you very much, and thank you for aggressively looking to enhance our teacher pool. But we certainly appreciate those that are part of our body right now, so thank you so much. Now moving on to routine matters. Approval of minutes. Seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of May the 2nd, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Discussion.
I just had one edit. My last name was misspelled on page 2, so I would just like to correct that for the record.
Certainly. Thank you. Yes, all right. Duly noted. So seeking to amend the motion reflecting the suggested change. That is what our... Ethan.
You can argue about my last name, it's a fact.
All right. Any other discussion or points? All of those in favor of accepting the minutes with the edit with Renee's last name, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to information and reports. Board members, do we have any communications and reports from other boards or organizations?
I do. Right.
Other boards or other organizations?
Oh, this is...
Any other boards or organization comments? All right. Now on to information and discussions.
Thank you. So over the last week, I've spent time in public schools around Connecticut. At Breakthrough Magnet School, I've sat in and helped create lessons for the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month there, and helped lead the Community Day presentation, and also was able to see a presentation by high school students and Yale students on teaching Japanese American incarceration during World War II in high schools. And these experiences have helped me to make a really difficult decision. But I'm taking this opportunity to announce my intent to resign from the board after the last meeting of the school year. I'm stepping down from the board to spend more time expanding the reach of my K through 12 AAPI programs and spend more time with my family. So I want to thank the board, my board colleagues here, and everyone I've worked with in the school district for their partnership and steadfast commitment to making our schools more inclusive, equitable, and accountable to the most vulnerable among us. I've learned so much from you. My life has been transformed by public service on this board, and I've inspired to do things I never considered possible. I joined communities across the state to pass 2 bipartisan bills on API K-12 education. Due to my education advocacy, I was appointed to the Governor's Hate Crimes Advisory Council to chair the Community Awareness Subcommittee, where we're working to make our schools safer and more inclusive by countering bias, bullying, and intimidation, and building a 21st century civic culture. I was elected to the UConn Faculty Senate's Executive Committee, where I bring what I've learned here to the shared governance of the university and pursuing the well-being of our students in higher education. So talking the talk requires one to walk the walk. So the big task ahead of me is my partnership with the State Department of Education to lead a design team in building our first API K-8 model curriculum, due in January. So the clock is ticking. And to expand our early college experience offering of UConn's Introduction to Asian American Studies course to our state's high schools. While I won't be joining you on the board, I will continue to support the work of educating the next generation of leaders. And I want to thank all the voters who supported me and all the families who've included me in their conversations about how important inclusion and equity are for our schools. So most of all, I'm looking forward to spending more time with my family. I plan to make up for all the missed bedtimes and family meals. And in leaving the Board of Education, I'm excited for someone else to be transformed by public service. So also, given the budgetary conditions of the district, I want to forego the typical gift of recognition of service, just save the money, put it towards the $700,000 shortfall. With that, I really want to thank everyone on the board for their support, and it has been an immense pleasure serving with you all.
So, we have you one more time, our next meeting, and so I will ask for, as we continue to absorb this information, for us to reserve next meeting to appropriately acknowledge you, your service, and your great contribution to this board and to this town. with excitement for bigger things you are soon to be doing on a statewide and national level. But I will ask, are there any immediate comments at all? Again, we're going to certainly appropriately acknowledge Jason at our last meeting of the month, but do want to see if there's any. I'm thinking the silence is speaking volumes.
I just have to, say what a positive impact you have been on this board. I'll save longer comments for next time, but the one thing that stands out, Jason, is over the years, I've had a lot of great conversations with board members about school operations and different things. Jason is unique in wanting to talk about curriculum and really kind of getting at the heart of matters. And so I'm excited to know the work that you'll be leading at a state level, to use your own words, to support inclusion, equity, our most vulnerable population, really promoting culture, AAPI. So kudos to you. And I'd like to just offer a round of applause on his announcement.
Ethan. Yes, echo. All right. So with that, we now will go on to future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. Our next and last meeting of the academic school year will be Tuesday, June the 6th, 2023, where we will have our regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock here in room 314. Do we have a request for a future agenda item? Seeing none, do we have any visitors that would like to make a comment? Please do approach the podium, share your name and your town of residence, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Appreciate it. John Lyons, 21 Chestnut Hill, West Hartford, Connecticut. I think most of you know I try to attend a lot, I don't make all of them, but a lot of the Board of Ed meetings. And tonight was certainly one of the most powerful that I've attended, particularly Gail, Claire, and Ari sharing your personal stories. I didn't like hearing them, and not because of you folks, but because of the content of the stories. There is no room for treating anybody, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on and what your beliefs are, with that kind of disrespect. I mean, Gail having to have a picture posted nationally, derogatory. Ari, what you've had to go through, and Claire, all three of you. It just was very upsetting and very powerful, and I think it was a very important conversation that occurred, but it's a shame that these types of things are happening. So I want to just say for the record, and really maybe I'm addressing more the audience and the folks watching at home, is these folks are unpaid volunteers. They're not getting paid for this, and they put up with a lot of bull stuff, and that's really, you shouldn't have to. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all of what you do. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I know you're really working hard for us and trying to represent the best interests of us, and doing it for free. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Scott Zweig, West Hartford, here again. I just wanted to talk about Teacher Appreciation Week, because it got glossed over a little bit. Specifics: the Bugby PTO and the Bugby parents did an amazing job last week, hosting luncheons, breakfasts. Parents provided school supplies, like everything they could have asked for, they got, and then some. And I heard that it was the best Teacher Appreciation Week in the whole town. You didn't hear that from me, but that's what I heard. So just props to the parents and the PTO and the teachers at Bugby, which is our district. They do a great job. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Midget size. Thank you. Cindy Gauthier, West Hartford. I just want to make a couple of comments about the discussion that was about the amendment to 8355. I was just taking a few notes as I listened, and just wanted to say where am I? Sorry. Your comment, Jason, about not changing the procedure because you're not denying anybody with the changes that are being proposed, but you are because you'll be denying in the future. And I'm sorry. I just feel like you are trying to silence the parents or the community that come to these meetings. And I understand everybody seems to have their feathers a little ruffled about my comments in particular, because I see some of it seem to pertain to me bringing out personal information about my child. I have tried for years, since my child was at Webster Hill, to get help for her and support. And that's why I started a couple years ago coming here, because I wasn't being heard. So I thought, well, if I get vocal where other people in my community can hear what happens in this town, maybe I'll get some attention. And apparently I have upset some people because it has gotten me some attention in the last couple years. Probably not the right way to go about it, but it got me results. It got my child in a different school. It got her in a little bit better of a place, but unfortunately it happened in her senior year. So I'm sorry if I upset anybody with my comments, but I think it is my personal choice to bring up my daughter's personal information because I am her mother. So I don't think I'm breaking any rules there. And I also, I know a lot of comments were made about how great this school system is, and it is. I grew up in this town. I've lived here my entire life. I love West Hartford. The problem is it's great for the top percentage of students that excel. And those are the ones that are noticed and recognized. My child is not one of those. And it should be the same experience for all children, regardless of their ability or disability. And that's what I fight for. And that's what this town needs to change. And I think perhaps we need to, since I keep, it's back and forth with we say things, you say things, nothing changes, nothing gets discussed any further than these meetings. Why don't we have meetings with parents? Why doesn't the superintendent do something like that so we can make real change? I don't like getting up here and bitching. I really don't. I want to see change. I want to see other children not go through what I've gone through. It's not just about my daughter. I'm not the only parent in this town that feels this way, trust me, because when I speak, I have had people on the radio stations call in and mention what I've said here that are appalled at the things that occur in this town, because it's not what West Hartford is about. I am not trying to dog everybody and make everybody look bad. And I totally sympathize with everything that you all experience on a personal level. That is wrong. I would never attack any of you like that. That's not my goal in this. And I totally sympathize with all of that. You should not have to go through any of that. But I just want to see things get better for all children, not just the top 10%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. With that, we do not have an executive session. Now seeking a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Meeting adjourned at 10:05.